and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IS. Welcome to another session of Geography, where from today we shall be having an initiation of the discussion of the portion of Indian geography. Asha, just remind me about the portion of uh, Atlas reading at the end. I'll tell you how to approach the Atlas. Okay. So, from today, our discussion shall be initiated about the portion of Indian geography. So, before directly jumping into the portion of Indian geography, it is very important to take a pause and reflect upon what you have studied. What are the portions that you have covered? Because oftentimes, what happens, guys, is, and this is in all seriousness, listen to this carefully, that you can apply for other subjects as well. Oftentimes, in the midst of attending the classes, attending the sessions on a daily basis, we get into such a kind of a flow, or rather we are embroiled in such a kind of a following of classes on a daily basis that we are unable to realize what is the portion that we have completed. Unless and until you realize that, there is no point about consolidation, there is nothing which will help you in revision as well. So what is it that we have covered in our journey for geography till now? So basically, we have covered the entirety of the portion of physical geography, the bulk of the conceptual portions we have covered. Now, with the help of geomorphology, now if I can take you back to the first session, many of you were attending in the first session as well. Many of you have joined us in between. So, from our journey from the first session, I still remember, I don't know if you recall it or not, many of you still had a kind of a basic doubt about what do we mean by latitude, what are you talking about longitude. So, from that basic, we had initiated the journey. We had talked about the very basic about how is it that the planet Earth rotates around its axis, how does it move around the sun. From there, we understood the formation of the planet. We not only understood the internal structure, we also covered the basic and the various different types of anomalies which are present across the surface, across the globe. Now we have covered geomorphology to a depth where we have also taken a look at the various volcanic eruptions across the world, earthquakes across the world, mountain ranges across the world. Why do they happen? Certain examples of plateaus across the world with the help of the Capval Craton, the Canadian Shield, etc. The erosional and the depositional landforms, along with examples where they can be found in India, where they can be found across the world. There, we tried to understand and gain an idea about the world. Then we initiated the discussion for climatology, and climatology was the portion where we spent the maximum time in. Now, I understand majority of you would have been absolutely uncomfortable in the portion of climatology because unlike the very regular preparation for civil services that majority of the candidates carry out, now in civil services, most of the candidates, they come with the perception that, okay, fair enough, we will study something about prime minister, we'll study something about parliament, we'll study something about the freedom movement and our work is done. So oftentimes there is a mismatch in what you study, what you revise. So oftentimes you miss out on a couple of sessions and you come with the expectation that the next session should be easily understood. But climatology defies that rule. And in climatology, we built upon the concept right from the formation of atmosphere, and we looked into as complicated a concept as Madden-Julian oscillation, Indian Ocean dipole, and also a kind of a factor-based representation of Indian climate and Indian monsoon. And let me assure you here, guys, if you simply adhere to the level of discussion that we have carried on in the session, that will be much more than sufficient than any of the reference books that your competition is reading. Okay, now you might not, right now at this point of time, you might not be able to ace all the MCQs, the multiple choice questions which are out there, because obviously if you are accustomed with something for the first time, it takes some amount of time to digest that, and that is quite a natural process. You should not be perturbed by it, you should not be demotivated or disturbed by that. So in climatology, we took a look at the various different concepts such as heat dome in the region of Canada, Siberia, Europe. We looked at the concept such as what are temperate cyclones, tropical cyclones, how they are named, where they occur, what are cloudbursts. Now, I hope anytime that you are opening up the news channels right now, or you are reading the newspaper, and when you are taking a look at the cloudburst events happening in Himachal Pradesh, I hope there comes a kind of an interconnect that, okay, there is a slope of the Himalayas, and that is why the monsoonal winds are getting driven up, and that is why you have the cloudbursts happening. The moment you are able to correlate and interrelate the portions of this session with the portions of the real day life, that is the moment where you won't find this subject difficult anymore. As long as you restrict this subject to just the PPTs or the books, this subject will be very punishing to you. But I always maintain that geography is not a subject for which you need copious amount of books. The moment you step outside your house, you observe your surrounding, you observe the soil, you observe the rock pattern. That in itself is the best teacher for geography. So I want you to be able to correlate, to be able to interrelate between different concepts, and I hope, and I already see many of you are able to do that. So I hope you carry on that. So with the help of climatology, we discussed many important concepts. We discussed the portion of global climate as well. So world geography also we covered there. Then we entered into the portion of oceanography, where we discussed about the oceanic water, what are the properties of oceanic water across the world, why is it that Mediterranean is comparatively warmer than Atlantic in the same latitude, why is it that Baltic Sea is comparatively colder? Why is it that the salinity factor varies in North Sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, in the Red Sea, in the portion of Bay of Bengal, in the portion of Arabian Sea? And here also, I would like to tell you that your preparation for civil services should be dependent on how and why rather than what. And what is the difference between them? For example, many of us traditionally, and that is some product of the type of exams that we have been facing till now, we have got a habit of memorizing and learning trivia. That, okay, I know which is the most saline water in the world. But why? That is something that we don't pay attention to. So here also, if I ask you certain amount of trivia, many of you will jump to the solution and will be very happy to answer that. But that kind of trivial answers and that kind of trivia making is something which is required only for, let's say, a Kaun Banega Crorepati out there, or a kind of a state service examination or a lower grade examination. If you have to carry on a sustained preparation of civil services, you have to understand the what, when, where, why, and how of any concept. So that is something that we have tried to inculcate in the entirety of the portion of physical geography. But let me also tell you, regardless of whatever depth that we have carried our discussion to, regardless of whatever matter of proficiency we have carried our discussion to, if you are unable to revise within the next 7 to 8 days, then let me tell you with a sort of guarantee, you will forget everything. So revision is also an absolute requirement, a prerequisite, if you want to take some extraction and some benefit out of all this hard work that you guys have been putting sitting in front of the screen as well. If you want to capitalize on that, you need to put attention to this. Now today, here, when we talk about the portion of Indian geography, the entire aspect of the geography of the world that we have studied, that is in order to understand India better. And this is also the reason why UPSC wants you to understand geography, so that you are able to understand India better. Now, and there is a reason for that. Let's suppose you are selected as an IS officer. You get posted in any of the districts, any of the states of the country. Now, if there are frequent farm failures which are happening, crop failures which are happening, if there's a mineral deposit in that region, what are the types of occupation which the people should be carrying out? Now, for that, you need to understand the basic geography of India. And all the portions of physical geography that we have studied, that will help us understand India in a better way. So here, in the portion of Indian geography, what is the portion that we are going to cover overall? And this will include the portion of human geography, economic geography, everything. I understand many of us, we don't know the name of the chapters in details. We just learn that, okay, in geography, we have to have notes for physical geography. We need to have notes for world geography. We need to have notes for biogeography. We need to have notes for economic geography, human geography, and we don't even realize what is included in that, what are the chapters included in that, but we just have that perception and we keep on chasing that. So all the portions we will cover, let me tell you or enlist the chapters that we are going to cover here. So first of all, we are going to start with the portion of physiographic division. Physiography. Then after that, we are going to cover the portion of, now Indian monsoon we have already covered, Indian climate we have already covered. So we are going to cover drainage systems. Systems and rivers of India. Then we are going to cover the portion of soil and forests. Is everybody comfortable with the font? Font is fine, right? So let's concentrate on the larger goal here, guys. If you are not comfortable with the font, is this font better for you? I see much more attention is being paid on the portion of the font size, the image and everything, lesser on the concept. So I hope this font size works. Okay. Then we are going to cover the portion of agriculture. Agriculture, the various different important types of crops, what are the requirement of that, organic farming, that is in so much discussion, green revolution, the limitations, benefits of the green revolution. Then we are going to cover the portion of minerals and industries. Then after that, we are going to cover the portion of population, settlement, and transport. But these areas, you can refer to it with the help of current affairs rather than delving too much into the portion. We will talk about some of the conceptual areas here also, but then largely the portion of current affairs is something which is valid. And that is the general trend even for the portion of Indian geography. Okay. So these are the portions that we are going to cover. Now in Indian geography, as a matter of fact, any of the areas which are relevant, which have been in discussion in current affairs for the past year, you will find that those are the areas which are asked in the examination as well. So always required to keep a track of the current affairs. Now you would find that sometimes certain random rivers are asked. Next time people start learning all the rivers, but they are not to be asked. Sometimes certain lakes or reservoirs are asked. Next time people will start rote learning and rectifying all the lakes, but then they are not asked again. So please do not end up chasing those factual questions out there. Those factual questions are asked because they would have been in relevance or in discussion for some time in the past 12 to 18 months. So here in Indian geography, always required to augment it with the portion of current affairs. Okay. Now, geological structure is not asked in the examination for general studies, has not been asked in the portion of mains also, in the optional also, for almost a decade now. You won't find, if you take a look at the PYQs, I'm sure you would have taken a look into it. I'm sure you would not have found out any question associated with the Dharwar rock system, the Purana rock system, the various different types of phases of rock system. You would not have come across those type of questions. Nonetheless, if you still want to cover it up, that it is included in the tablet lecture, so you can always take a look at it, revise it from the tablet lecture itself. Okay. All these portions we are going to cover both for the prelims and mains, and as we go ahead, we'll be discussing whether it is relevant for, which is the portion relevant for prelims, which is relevant for the mains exam. Natural vegetation we are going to cover in the portion of forest itself, Gurjeet. And energy resources, you are going to cover it in the portion of science and tech. Okay. Water resources in terms of rivers that we will study in the river systems of India. And there also, just restrict yourself to the portion of current affairs only. Okay, don't restrict yourself to the portion that you are studying here as a static part. So restrict yourself to the portion of current affairs. You would study the magazines such as Down to Earth, etc. There you would be confronted with why is it that, for example, Delhi is getting flooded so continuously, Bangalore is getting flooded, we are destroying the lakes, so more lakes are getting created. So all these portions of current affairs, if you keep in mind, more than sufficient. Okay. And then I did not revise what I learned in class even at least one day. Congratulations then in that case. And I can only applaud the endeavor. PYQs and mains questions, should we include the questions of the year before 2011? No. No, that is something which should not be included. Ideally, you should be analyzing the questions which have appeared ever since 2014-15 onwards. That should form a trend. Okay, but for practice, I would suggest practice as many the test series that you encounter. There you will come across many of the facts. So those facts will help you understand or gain additional sources of information. Electricity, again, you will study in the portion of science and tech. Okay, right? Yes, Zubair, that is sufficient. Do the syllabus change for the next 3 years? No, they don't. Akshita, revise it with the PPTs and the ARMs. That is more than sufficient. Or the NCRTs which are available online. Okay. Now, here, today we initiate the discussion about the physiographic divisions of the country. And we initiate the discussion about our own country. We try to understand it. And I hope for this, you don't need me to tell you. But all of us are aware about the variety, the varied forms that are prevalent from north to south, from east to west. Whether we consist or whether we talk about the tallest mountains of the world to the oceans, whether we talk about the one of the very dry areas of the planet, that is the Thar desert, to one of the rainiest areas across the planet in the region of Cherrapunji and Mawsynram. We have it all. Be it the most fertile plains in the form of the alluvial northern Gangetic plains, to the very old and hard plateau structure, that is the Peninsular plateau, and also the various different islands. India does have it all. India does have all the various different climatic variations as well, from very low temperature in the northern extremities of the country to a very high temperature in the southern extremity, to low humidity to very high humid conditions. We do have everything. As a result of that, what happens? As a direct consequence, you have an impact on the food habits. You have the impact created on the social structures. You have the impact created on the culture traditions of a region. And owing to the fact that this is a region, this is a land which has witnessed people coming in from various parts of the world throughout the pages of history, you will find that right from the time of the Indo-Greeks, you had people coming in from different parts of the world and making this land their own. So that is why this particular land is also referred to as the melting pot of civilizations, where all the civilizations, they have come into it and they have commingled. Many of our food habits that we have, that is not something that originated in our country. That is something we have imbibed from abroad. Many of the various different types of food articles that we consume on a daily basis, such as tomatoes, potatoes, etc., they were not indigenously to be found in India. They were introduced by foreigners into our land, and look how we have taken up on that. So this is a land which we refer to as the subcontinent. Rarely will you hear the usage of this term in other places of the world. You don't hear about it. Why? Because the diversity which exists, the distinction in the types of the feeding habits, the lifestyle, the beliefs, the culture, the tradition, the language, the kind of variation which exists, that is simply unparalleled. That is why it is said that in this country, if you move for 100 kilometers, the language starts to change. The food definitely will change. The culture and the belief, the faith, everything begins to change. So there is a kind of a immense diversity. Nowhere across the world will you find such kind of diversity, which is born out of this land itself. You have the land of immigrants out there where you will find diversity, but that is because here Irishmen had settled, here Italians had settled, here Germans had settled. So in this town you will find Germans, and you have different racial existences in various countries, but that is a result of large scale immigration. But here you have that variation which is naturally traditionally found, and that is why India is regarded as a subcontinent. In the late 1800s and in the early 1900s, there was this very predominant point of view across the various parts of the world that if you want to study the geography of the world, study India first. Because here you will get the result, or you will get the example of almost anything and every geographical phenomena across the globe. So that is what this country, this land represents. So this is a question that UPSC had asked in the mains examination, that why is it that India is referred to as a subcontinent? I hope that when you write it, you will be able to represent the variabilities and the variations which exist in terms of the flora, fauna, climate, physiography, geology, topography, everything is variable. As a result of that, you have a significant diversity in geographical entities, and also that results in significant diversity in the type of governance structures, in the types of historical accounts, in the types of cultural traditions. Everything also changes. Okay, now here, when we will talk about the portion of the physiographic division, we are going to talk about the location of the country first of all, and the various different physiographic divisions that we are going to study. There we are going to study about the Himalayas, the Peninsular Plateau, the North Indian plains, the islands which are there, the coastal plains, the ghats, everything. Now, in NCRTs, in all the various different reference books, you are supposed to just know the names and the nomenclature. That, okay, this part of Peninsular Plateau is referred to as the Madhya Bharat Pathar or the Central Uplands. This part of Peninsular Plateau is referred to as the Deccan Trap. So we are not going to restrict our discussion only up to that level. As I always told you since day one, and I hope by now it would be ingrained, that our discussion is not going to be dependent upon that, okay, this book is telling us, or NCRT is telling us only this. We are going to elevate the level of discussion. And I'll tell you why that is going to help you out. We are going to understand the basic formation of each of them. Now, basic formation of Himalayas we have covered in significant detail. But we have not covered, or I'm sure many of us are not aware, how the northern plains came into existence. I'm sure many of us are not aware how the Peninsular Plateau came into existence. Why is it that the Western Ghats, even though they are very steep, but there the continental shelf is very wide? Why is it that the Western Ghats, they represent a kind of a discontinuity? Why is it that the portion of Meghalaya that is considered to be a part of Peninsular Plateau, even though it is far off in the northeast? Why is it that the region of Thar in Rajasthan is still considered to be a desert? So in a way, we are going to study about the origin of this particular land. Now, you will not get a direct question that discuss about the origin of the Peninsular Plateau, discuss about the origin of the Deccan Traps. You won't get a question like this. But whenever you get a kind of a real world understanding of how they came into existence, this will help you understand why is it that when you talk about the mineral deposits, majority of the minerals of the country, they are found within the peninsular part of the country. Why is it that the regions such as Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Karnataka, parts of Rajasthan, why is it that these are Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, why these are rich in minerals? Why don't we have a lot of minerals in the region of Uttar Pradesh, for example, the western part of Uttar Pradesh, right? Also, if we study this in greater detail, that will help us understand the portion of even soil. That why is it that you have red soil in the portion of the peninsular part of the country, and why is it that you have alluvial soil in certain other parts of the country. So that in-depth understanding and interlinkage of the topic will happen very automatically if you understand the origin of different parts of India. Having said that, still I would tell you, at any point of time, if you are uncomfortable with the portion of the origin of any parts, don't fret over it. In general studies in particular, UPSC is never going to ask you about the origin point. Other than the Himalayas, which we have covered in the portion of plate tectonics, that much information would be more than sufficient. Okay, so here, let us initiate the discussion. First of all, we will start the discussion with the portion of the location of the country. So if you take a look at the location, so India lies entirely in the northern hemisphere. Now the southern extent is around 8 degrees 4 minutes north, and it extends up till 37 degrees 6 minutes north latitude. Even though the southernmost point of India is considered to be Indira Point, which is present in the region of the Andaman and Nicobar, and that is in the Nicobar group of islands, and that is where the extent is 6 degree 45 minutes north. So that is the extent. Now east to west extent from 68 degree 7 minutes east to 97 degree 25 minutes east, that is the east to west extent that we have. India is divided by Tropic of Cancer in between. Now, this location of the country, now this gives us with a unique set of advantages. Advantages that many other countries of the world, they do not have. For example, we have, or we as a country are sitting atop the vast Indian Ocean. No other ocean, all the patriotics amongst us who were basically getting hurt and getting so much sad inside that why don't we have an India type of climate, we have British type climate, we have China type climate, what is this kind of discrimination, we don't have India type of climate. So here if you analyze, it is only here that you have an ocean named after a subcontinent, that is the Indian Ocean. Nowhere else will you find an ocean named after a particular country or a subcontinent. In India, we have that. So India proudly sits atop the portion of Indian Ocean. Now you have a significant bulk amount of trade and economic realities which carry out or which are carried out in the portion of Indian Ocean. And India's location atop that is of significant benefit and significant amount of importance. Majority of the international trade routes that you will find. Now, I hope we are aware that almost 90% of the trade by volume, global trade, it happens via the portion of the ocean ways. That is the oceans. Now, majority of the trade that happens through the region of the Indian Ocean, you'll find that it moves very close to here. Sometimes it will take, the ships will take a break at around Colombo port, or otherwise they will go directly from here. So India's location at this point of time, at this region, is very advantageous. We have huge amount of economic benefits that can be accrued. Now, development of the Virinium port, which is happening in the region of Tiruvananthapuram, that will give us the advantage unparalleled. Even though that project has run into controversy and roadblock because of huge amount of protests which are going on and which have been carried on in that region. But this port, the Virinium port which is being developed, that will help us pull out a lot amount of traffic which takes a break in the portion of Colombo port. They would come to India and then they would move abroad. Also, if you notice here, if you observe, let's suppose the trade route which is going from here, it is here that you have the region of Strait of Malacca or the Malacca Strait. Now, all the trade which is carried out from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean necessarily does move through the region of the Malacca Strait. Almost all the trade. So that provides us with a kind of a choke point. For example, if push comes to shove, here, that is the Nicobar Islands, we can impose a naval blockade of the portion of the Malacca Strait. In a way, we can stop all the traffic going into the Malacca Strait. But why would we do that? In order to economically cripple our enemies. For example, whenever you have the Indo-China tensions, now one of the biggest worries that China has is that India will blockade the Malacca Strait. And this has been ever persistent. That is why India is also going for rapid expansion of infrastructure in the region of Nicobar Islands as well. It is a different matter that even that Great Nicobar project of development of naval facilities and development of the Air Force base there, that has also hit a roadblock because of litigations which have been filed and there's a court case which is going on about the environmental clearances which have been provided. So as of now, that Great Nicobar project has been halted, but nonetheless, in some time in the future, we will have that. During the time of the Doklam crisis, we were very close to exercising that threat of imposing a blockade. Now understand, majority of the trade that China carries out from the region of the Europe, that moves through this Strait of Malacca, and it moves to the eastern cities of China where you have all the ports. That is why, in order to counter that, China has been developing since 1950s itself. It has developed a Karakoram highway moving through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and now China is developing the Pakistan occupied or Pakistan economic corridor, China Pakistan economic corridor, having a port city at Gwadar, the CPEC as it is referred to. Now why? So as to escape that kind of blockade which can be imposed. But our unique location, our unique position of power, in the region of Indian Ocean, we have the most powerful blue water navy which is there. And our naval doctrine is to be a net security provider. We are there to provide security to the other people if required. We are not there to impose security like China does. But our location is such that this particular western coastline is so advantageous that even during the Kargil war, I'm sure many of you would have read about it in the books or in the various different articles if you are interested in the defense. So basically, during the Kargil war, as the war was stretching beyond expectation, Indian Navy again came very, very close of imposing a blockade for all the ships entering into Pakistan because our location is such. Now, we can impose that blockade. That would economically cripple the adversary. That advantage Pakistan doesn't have. That advantage China doesn't have. Right? That advantage India has owing to its location. But it is not only a matter of the hard power. We as a country, we have always been the followers of the soft power. But we have also indicated that when we have to demonstrate the utility of strength, we don't take a step back. We demonstrate that strength with absolute alacrity, with an absolute sense of urgency. But when it comes to the humanitarian aspect, that is something that we consider to be as our strength, that we consider humanity to the topmost. Humanitarian and disaster relief operations across the region of Indian Ocean, India has always taken a lead. It is not only restricted to the fact that Indian citizens are struck there, so we will only evacuate them. No. When you had Operation Rahat, which was carried out in the war-torn region of Yemen to evacuate Indian citizens, India managed to evacuate citizens of 26 other countries. No other country did that. So that is something which is something we cover as, or we consider as, our strength. We have a vast exclusive economic zone in the region of Indian Ocean, which provides us with a unique prospect to exploit the economic opportunities and economic minerals present in that area as well. Okay, so these are some of the very apparent benefits. Economic benefit associated with lying there, we have not been able to utilize that to the fullest extent, because rather than all the ships taking a break, coming over to, let's say, Mumbai, taking a break and then going, what they would rather do, and what many of them rather do, is that they take a break at Colombo and then they move ahead, or they take a break at Singapore. Now, why do they need to take a break? In order to refuel, restock, the break for the seamen as well. So that is why they take a break. But with the development of very significant port facilities which are happening, we are going to take that advantage in the near time future as well. So this is the geostrategic and geopolitical advantage that India has. Those of you who will study the portion of the geography as an optional, you will study about the various different theories which have indicated that how the entire world conflict for a long period of time was driven for accessibility to the warm waters. Warm waters in the sense which remain ice free and which can be used by the merchant ships throughout the year. We have had that, and we don't have that today. We have had that for centuries altogether. After all, Bay of Bengal was considered by many historians, they have written it, that the Cholas, they considered the Bay of Bengal as their own domestic lake. That was the might of the Chola power. And also, when we talk about the trade, so we have had trade with the Roman Empire across the western coastline for hundreds and hundreds of years. Long before these European powers they settled in and they started conquering various areas, we have been carrying out the economic opportunities. So this is a land of opportunities. This is a land of culture, of civilization. We are a living civilization. We are not a civilization like Egypt or Mesopotamia, where our civilizational extent is only varied up to what is the aspect of archaeological findings that we carry out. On a daily basis, the practices that we follow, the food that we consume, how we deal with the family, that is our belief system. That is a living embodiment of our civilization. And that is why it is indeed a subcontinent in the truest of the sense. But not only the water bodies, even the land areas. In case of land areas also, our location is quite unique and quite advantageous. For example, if you take a look at the country like Nepal or Bhutan, now, these countries, if they have to carry out a meaningful and bulk international trade, they would require the availability of ports. It is a different matter that China is enticing them with a kind of a railway connect all the way through Tibet into the Chinese port cities. But then, the real pragmatism and the real economy works if they are able to trade after crossing India. So that also provides India with a unique sense of advantage. But rather than serving as a kind of a dictatorial power in that case or an authoritarian regime, we have always lent a helping hand. When the disaster struck in Nepal during the time of Kathmandu 2015 earthquake, India dispatched its first rescue mission within a couple of hours of that. That is the kind of respect, that is the kind of importance that India gives to its neighbors. It is something indeed to be proud of. So, that is something you have to understand about the advantage of the location of India. What can be the advantage associated with it? Okay. Now, why we are discussing about it? This is something that I'm sure all of us know about our country, but also you have the questions which are asked in the essay paper, in the GS paper as well. What are the advantages that India has sitting atop the Indian Ocean? What are the geostrategic advantages that we have due to our location? So all those you have to talk about. Okay. Now, here we also have to understand that this is an opportunity that we have to utilize our location, because Alfred Mahan, one of the greatest geostrategic thinkers that you will come across, Alfred Mahan, obviously a US citizen he was, so he talked about that he who controls the water bodies controls the world. And that is where you had a famous statement which was issued that the 1800s belong to the Atlantic, the 1900s belong to the Pacific, and the next century will belong to the Indian Ocean. What does that mean? That means that during the 1800s or the 19th century, countries across the Atlantic, they grew, their trade grew. Then In the 20th century, the countries across the Pacific, they grew. Japan, Korea, China, then you had the rise of Russia as well, US, North American countries, they all developed. This is the time for the development of the countries across the Indian Ocean. And sitting atop the Indian Ocean, we are in a unique place to utilize that. Okay? So that is something that you have to understand, that why it is considered to be the land of opportunities, and why one should be always optimistic and to be feel blessed to be born in this country. Yes, we have many different lacunae, but that does exist everywhere across the world. But we work on that. And as Shashi Tharoor famously said, we are not the land of the dragon, we are the land of an elephant. So the elephant might move very slowly, but once it moves, it does move with a kind of a determination that the world takes a notice of. And the world will take a note of how India moves in the modern geopolitical era in the 21st century. Okay? Now, with that, we move ahead with the aspect of the other location and the neighbors. Okay? So, here, first of all, the location of it. So, in the location, the portion of Kanyakumari is at 8 degree 4 minutes, and the northernmost portion is 37 degree 6 minutes. So, overall, you have the expanse of close to around 3200 kilometers. So the north, south, east to west extent is almost similar. East to west extent, that is from 68 degree 7 minutes to 97 degree 25 minutes. That is again around 2933 kilometer. The southernmost point is the Indira point here. Okay. Now, ideally, we have one time zone. So the time zone which passes through roughly the center, not the exact center of the east-west extent, but roughly the central portion of the east-west extent of the country, that is chosen as the designated time zone. Okay. And this passes through various different states that will be relevant for your prelims. Okay. Why people still think that moving abroad is a big achievement? That is a cultural aspect, my dear friend. We are still having that colonial overhang. That is why if I tell you that you are doing good work, you will not value it that much. But if someone from London tells you, or someone from Washington tells you that you are doing good work, you will be very happy. That colonial overhang sadly does persist for a few decades and maybe a century or more. But as and when we rise in our own might, that is something which will overshadow the entirety of the world. So that is going to happen. That is bound to happen. Regardless of the difficulties that we face, we are bound to rise up as a civilization. Because if you take a look back at the history does repeat itself. Around what we were 2000 years back, we had a significant decline. We rose back up again in the form of various different kingdoms. All of those kingdoms, they attested to the geographical reality entity which was India. India is not a land boundary. India is an idea. We represent an idea. We represent a land which has never looked outwards. You will never hear about the fact, other than a few sporadic cases in the case of the Chola Empire, that Indians have been expansionists. No, we are very happy where we are. So as we grow up in our own might, that will come. Okay. Now, here we talk about the time zone, the one that we follow for standard timekeeping. So that is where we talk about this time zone or the standard meridian. It passes through 82.5 degree east. This is the standard time zone. Now, it passes through the region around Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh. You would have heard about that name either from the series, TV series, or otherwise as well. So, from that region, it passes through. It touches Madhya Pradesh's border, moves through Chhattisgarh, Odisha, and Andhra Pradesh. So, these different states that it passes through, it is basically relevant for your prelims. Okay, so that is where it goes through. Now, Then we come to the various different neighbors that we have. From east to west, we are surrounded from the land area as well. In the case of the ocean as well, we are surrounded with various different neighbors. So when we talk about the neighbors, so starting from the east, we have the longest land border with Bangladesh. Then we have a neighbor in the face of Myanmar, Bhutan, Nepal, China to the north. Then comes Afghanistan, and then comes Pakistan. So these are our land neighbors, right? Majority of us from our very childhood days, we have been so very myopic in the point of view that other than Pakistan, we have not heard any other name. So we only think about Pakistan as a kind of a neighbor, as a kind of a border. When they think about it, immediately you think only about Pakistan. But the longest land border that we share with any country is with Bangladesh. Then across the water body, we have our neighbors in the form of Sri Lanka and Maldives. They are considered as our as our maritime neighbors. And here, please don't get mistaken that many of us, we think about the international boundary. When we think about international border, earlier I would not have explained this, but ever since the learning that I have gained from the number of oceans that you guys have listed, so I'll explain this as well. When we talk about the border, don't think that only the land border constitutes the international border. Maharashtra also has an international border, right? Karnataka also shares an international border, right? So all these coastlines that you see, they also, beyond 12 nautical miles, there also exists an international border. Okay, so we have very few regions such as Haryana, Delhi, then you have Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and Telangana. These are the only regions which do not have an international border. Rest, all of the areas, the states, etc., they do have an international border. The longest international border is with Bangladesh. The shortest international border is with Afghanistan. Okay, I'll tell you about the border with Afghanistan here as well. Now, many of us, we don't consider, when we talk about the borders on the north, we don't consider Afghanistan as a border, but we do share a border with Afghanistan. And it is in this portion of the region of Jammu and Kashmir. It is a different matter that as of now, this region is under the portion of Pakistan occupied Kashmir, but very much a part of the territorial claims of India, and very much what the parliament, what the people, and what the nation considers to be a part of our country. So that is where the region of Afghanistan shares a very small border. And this is the argument which India makes at global diplomatic table, where India basically goes ahead to argue that, look, all the various different borders that you have, or all the various different discussions that you have about Afghanistan's future, we deserve a say, and we should be brought to the conversation table because we are natural neighbors of Afghanistan. And it is here where Pakistan comes ahead and says that, no, this is not happening because the region that you are considering to be the border with Afghanistan, that is under our control. You don't share any border with Afghanistan. The portion of Afghanistan which shares a border with India, that is also very important historically as well. That is the panhandle shape of the land. The panhandle shape of the land that you see here. Panhandle means you would have seen the pans, the cooking utensil. It has got a thin handle. So that kind of shape this is. And this is what is referred to as the Wakhan corridor. This is the region of Wakhan corridor. Okay. So this region of Wakhan corridor, that is what we share our border with. Now, Wakhan corridor has been very interesting historically, has been used quite significantly historically, because if you move to the south of Wakhan corridor, you'll find very high lofty mountains. If you move to the north of Wakhan corridor, again, that is the region where you have the Pamirs and all the mountainous areas there as well. Wakhan corridor provides you with a kind of a passageway. It is not that the Wakhan corridor is at sea level. Absolutely not. It is also at an elevation. But it provides you with an easy movement of sorts rather than navigating through these very lofty and steep sided mountains. So that is the importance of Wakhan. Historically, all the traders, the merchants who would want to go to the region of China or would move from Europe to China, they would be moving through the Wakhan corridor. So Wakhan corridor, even today, you will find that many of the cultures and traditions that they follow, that is based upon a kind of an economy or a kind of a culture which was influenced by someone coming from Europe, someone coming from the region or the Mongols, the Mongol tradition, etc. Everything is commingled here. After all, the cultural milieu of a place is a remnant of or is a byproduct of its history, of the people who have graced that region. So that is also the case with Wakhan corridor. Now, because here, as we have already talked about it, that it is in this region where you have the Karakoram ranges, here you have the Karakoram Pass. China had constructed a highway in this portion in the late 50s itself. And it had constructed a good highway for that matter. We had not developed our border infrastructure at that point of time. Now, here what we have done in the year which had produced the very vicious Galwan clash that everybody remembers. Now, for the past decade almost, we have been activating the northern airfields where we can operate the aircraft. It is very close to the Karakoram Pass here that India strategically has developed the northernmost airfield, that is the Daulat Beg Oldi. And we manage successful air operations there with the help of the heavy transport aircrafts. And we have also managed to connect that with a resilient infrastructure from the portions of civilization. That Daulat Beg Oldi airfield is only around 8 kilometers from the Karakoram Pass, where this highway goes through. So that has given a lot of jitters in the mind of the strategic thinkers in China. And it is one of the very relevant and one of the very most followed theories is it is because of this sudden growth in Indian infrastructure around the DBO sector, Daulat Beg Oldi sector, that China started to exert a push here. But we retaliated with our impact across the Kailash ranges. So that is why you will come across the various different news of the talks and the stalemate going on. But also, because of this, China is planning to construct another kind of a pathway from the region of Wakhan corridor into the region of Pakistan, so as to gain access to the warmer waters, so as to in a way counter the kind of choke point, the hold that we have over the region of Malacca Strait. Okay? Now, then we move over to the portion of physiography. And as I told you, China also shared longest border with India. No, we have the longest border with Bangladesh. Okay? If this region is occupied by Pakistan occupied Kashmir, how India join international boundary? As in, I hope we are aware what is Pakistan occupied Kashmir. I hope that the region of Jammu Kashmir that we consider, our territorial boundary that we consider is that. Okay, this is our territorial boundary. Okay. Now, significant portion as of now, some portion is under the control of Pakistan. Pakistan has handed out some portion as a gift to China. So you have some portions here in the Aksai Chin region, which has been gifted to China in the 60s. This is on the Gilgit-Baltistan region, etc. That is in the controlled sovereignty of Pakistan. So that is the portion. Okay. Right? And I'm asking about Afghanistan. So this portion is under the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. This is also under Pakistan occupied Kashmir. But when you have to draw the international border, you will draw this as the international border, isn't it? And I am unable to understand what the conflict at this point is. Okay. Uh, Now, is Wakhan corridor used for China-Pakistan economic corridor? No. Okay. Now, and I'm not going to come into the details of can we capture it, can we recapture it, etc. I'm not going to go into those details. So here, when we talk about physiography, physiography is an outcome of the structure, process, and the stages of development, right? Yes, Garvit. They gave the Sakshgam Valley. Along with that, during the 62, so Sakshgam Valley provided a connectivity to the region of Aksai Chin as well. Okay. And that emboldened their stay in the region of Aksai Chin. Okay. Ladakh has come in India map, then why it is not added in the state list? As in, yes, Gurjeet, we consider that as our territory. Okay. So now, physiography is the outcome of structure, processes, and the stage of development, the topographical reality. So, the physiographic division of India broadly, from north to south, we can have the classification as the northern mountains, that is the Himalayas, and the mountains to the north of it, that we consider as Trans Himalayas. Trans Himalayas basically translates into something beyond the Himalayas. Then we have the northern plains, the Thar desert, the Peninsular plateau, the coastal plains, the ghats that we have, and then we also have the islands. We are blessed in terms of the strategic reach in the form of islands as well. Okay, so that is what we have as our physiographic division. Now, here, we will take a look at the formation of each one of them other than the Himalayas, which we have covered intensively, that how the Himalayas got created due to the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate colliding with each other, leading to the upliftment of the Tethyan Sea floor, and furthermore added by the continental collision. So we start first of all with the basics of these ranges. So first of all, when you take a look at the Himalayas, now you will find that three ranges, they are almost continuous from the northwestern part to the northeastern part. These are considered to be the Himalayan ranges. When we consider a range is what? Range is a kind of a physiographical feature that we associate when you have a continuity of, let's say, the mountainous features which are enabled. So that continuity which persists or prevails, that is what we refer to as a range. So in the Himalayan range, you will consider these three ranges, which are those: the inner Himalayas or the Himadri. So the Himalayan ranges, Himalayan ranges are what? You have the inner Himalayas or Himadri. Then you had middle Himalayas or Himachal. And then you have the outer Himalayas, that is Shivaliks. Now these are continuous. But then there are few ranges which lie beyond these Himalayan ranges, which are not so very continuous. These are referred to as the trans Himalayas. Trans means beyond the region of the Himalayas. So what is it that you consider as trans Himalayas? So trans Himalayas, you will have the ranges here, basically Karakoram, Karakoram range, Then you have Ladakh ranges. Then you have Zaskar ranges. And you have the Kailash range. These lie beyond the Great Himalayas or the Inner Himalayas. That is the Himadri, hence the name Trans-Himalayas. Overall, if you take a look at the orientation or the alignment, now there you will find that the mountains in an alignment, they are much more distributed here, right? They are much more wider here, and they get very, very narrow as you go to the east. That distance between the ranges, it decreases. So here, automatically you can come to a conclusion that there is a greater amount of compression which happens in the eastern part as compared to the northwestern part. Now, in both these areas, you will observe that basically there is a kind of a variation here. Karakoram ranges are here, my dear friend. These are the Karakoram ranges. Now here you will find that the mountain ranges, they suddenly, they bend to the south. Okay, their direction changes suddenly to the south. And here also, the direction of the various different mountains, for example, the Hindu Kush, Kirthar, Suleiman, etc., that also changes to the south. So basically, we can say that the axis in terms of the direction of the ranges, that undergoes a bend. We can say that here the axis of the mountains was like this, and suddenly it has bent like this, isn't it? So this is what is referred to as a syntaxial bend. This is what is syntaxial bend. So the Himalayan mountains, they have got two syntaxial bends which are present. One syntaxial bend in the east is where you have the presence of the Namcha Barwa. Here you have the region or the peak of Namcha Barwa, slightly north of Arunachal. So this is where you have Namcha Barwa. Here you have the Nanga Parbat. So the two syntaxial bends, they are indicated to be existent around these peaks. So that is where the axis of the mountains, they change. So the syntaxial bend, again a problem with the font size. Okay, okay, fair enough. Let's ignore this. Let's have the broader font. See, earlier what used to happen, I'm not saying that this is the case, but earlier what used to happen, at least in our school days, something that we witnessed, that many of us would focus on the fact that whether the tube light is nice or not, whether the fans are working or not, and everything being taught in the class would always be very secondary or tertiary. The prime attention would be that, okay, the chalk is a good colored chalk or not, whether we can take something. So again, I would say, right now you have become adults in your life. I'm sure you have. So please pay attention on the basic facts which are given. I hope that this is something which is understood in detail. Please don't focus on the cosmetic things, that font size is this, color is this is not good, that is not good. Please focus on the basic things. Okay, I will use the broader fonts if that is what you require. I will use the broader fonts, but after some time, you yourself will get uncomfortable with that. So here, syntaxial bend across the east around Namcha Barwa. around the west, you have around Nanga Parbat. Okay, so these are where you have the variations in terms of the directionality that the mountain takes. And this is basically to indicate that the axis of the mountain that you see here, what is the axis? This is the axis, isn't it? This is the general axis. Here, suddenly you will find that the axis has changed. Now, there is also a greater amount of compression which is observed in the eastern part as compared to the western part, northwestern part. In the northwestern part of the country, here, if you go into the region of Punjab, from there itself, you will start observing the various different hills and mountains. But initially, you will be confronted with Shivaliks. Then, after some distance, after let's say 400 kilometers or so, you will get the Himachal ranges. Then, after again some distances, then you will have a view of the Great Himalayas. That is the amount of expanse that it is. Now, in these areas, very close to the plains itself, if you stand, North Bengal plains, you will get a good view of the Great Himalayas because there the compression is very immense. If I tell you the reason behind the compression and why this axis has changed, so that reason is something that you can always associate with your common day physics or your common day experiences. Now, everybody would have ridden a bicycle or a motorbike or a scooter in your life, right? Now, when you ride those, what is it that you would have experienced? That when you apply the front brakes suddenly, when there's a sudden brake in the front, what happens? The rear swivels a bit, right? Even in a bicycle, in your younger days, you would have seen suddenly apply the front brakes, the rear swivels. In the case of the motorbike also, if you apply the front brakes, the rear swivels as in turns a bit, right? Now, I'm sure you would have experienced this. Something very, very similar happened in the case of the Indian and the Eurasian plate collision as well. How? So here, if I can explain it to you in this particular portion, let's suppose this you consider as the Eurasian plate. Now, Eurasian plate is something which had the minor Burmese plate associated. This was a minor plate. Burmese plate was a minor plate associated with the Eurasian plate. And here you had the major plate, that is the Eurasian. And then you had the Indian subcontinent undergoing a kind of a collision. Now, this Indian subcontinent, as it was undergoing a collision, first of all, it was this portion which collided. And it was this portion where the folding happened. But then, as this portion collided, there was a kind of a opposition or resistance. And this resistance was felt here. So automatically what happened? There was a kind of a general swivel. And this portion started colliding furthermore. That is why not only do you observe the kind of a mountain bend to be somewhat like this, you would also observe that across the sides also you have the development of the fold. It is because how these collisions have happened. You already had a landmass in this shape, and that is where the collision actually happened. So, as there was an opposition in this area, in the northwestern portion, automatically the other portion pushed through, and there was a general collision there. So that is why that still continues to happen. So that is why there still you will find a greater amount of significant amount of compression, and the rocks are very, very compressed in this area because in general the axis of collision underwent a slight amount of variation. Earlier, the collision was only happening like this. Then, after the opposition was encountered here, you had a collision across this area. That is why you have fold mountains in this region as well. Now, furthermore, when we talk about the general properties of the Himalayas, so they consist of the Himalayas and the region of the northeastern hills, and they have a series of various mountains. Now, they have been created how? Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian plate, upliftment of the Tethyan sea floor, and Indian plate continued to push. Even today, it is the Indian plate which is pushing. Now, as the Indian plate is pushing, that is deforming the fold as well, the shape of the fold. So majority of the folds that you will see in the Himalayas, majority of the folds, they will indicate to you a property where they are steeper on the southern side and more gentle on the northern side. That is the Eurasian plate side. They are gentle. And you have steep southern slope, and gentle northern slope. This is why? Because it is the Indian plate which continues to push. So this kind of a unique topography, that is referred to as the hogback topography. Hogback topography. Okay, that is a feature that you will find across the Himalayan ranges. General orientation of the Himalayan ranges northwest to southeast, and length of the entire Himalayas is close to around, that is the general extent, close to around 2500 kilometers from the west, and its width varies between 160 to 400 kilometers from north to south. So this is the kind of a cross-sectional appearance of how these Himalayan mountains, they have been in appearance. Now here, I want you to put your focus into the portion that is the greater or the inner Himalayas, that is Himadri. Here you have the middle or the lesser Himalayas, that is the Himachal. You have the Shivalik or the outer Himalayas, right? And in between them, you'll find the presence of MCT, MBT, and HFF. What are these? This is what is referred to as main central thrust, This is main boundary thrust, and this is what you refer to as the Himalayan frontal fault. The Himalayan frontal fault. Now, what are these? All these are basically fault lines, faults which are referred to as thrust faults. So we have discussed in the portion when we were talking about the formation of the Himalayas. There we had discussed that how after every range was getting created, there was a crack which developed. At the zone of deformation, there was a crack which developed. Some portions started sinking, and then again another kind of folding happened. So those were the thrust faults. They are named as thrust faults because the fault is what? A kind of a crack where you have a relative movement of the different areas. So there, the crack has been created because of the thrust, because of the forward force, because of the forward motion. And that is why you have the creation or the existence of thrust fault. So when we talk about the thrust fault, so these thrust faults, they are created, the large cracks where you have a relative motion which are created due to the push movement, right? So large cracks or Rather than cracks, it would be much more apt if we use the term faults. Faults which develop between the mountain systems due to the forward thrust motion of the plates. So here, while we took a look at the formation of the Himalayas, there also we observed that initially you had the creation of the Great Himalayas, you had a folding which happened, including the upliftment of the Tethyan seafloor, you had an upfold. Now, that was the Great Himalayas. Now, there, as the land continued to push, as the Indian plate continued to push, and there was a compression from the Eurasian side as well, not only did the height continue to increase, it started getting narrower in the process and it started getting taller. But there was a limitation up till which this region could experience deformation, because these are rocks which are getting deformed. These are not your pieces of plastic or paper that you can deform to the endless extent. These are rocks. So the rocks have a deformation ability. When you carry on a compression beyond that deformation ability, that is when they break. It develops a crack or a fault line. So here, after some time, you had the development of crack. So after some time, you had a development of a crack. Yeah. Right? Now, the further push which was happening, now this continued to compress this mountain already formed. The mountain continued to get narrower. And then, meanwhile, there was a point of resistance here as well, which was created. While there was some movement happening here, there was a point of resistance, and that led to the emergence of the second range. Yes, very good. We have covered this in the portion of plate tectonics already. So you would be aware of this. So that is how you had the creation of a thrust fault and another range would get created. Now, furthermore, as this compression would continue, some movement would happen across this thrust fault. The height of the existing mountain would increase. The second mountain range would also start to increase in height, continue to increase their height. Both of them would continue to get narrower and narrower as well. And eventually, there would be a thrust fault or a deformation fault developed here as well. So that is where a continuous process and a continuous repetition has created a setup where you have the shivalics which have been created the latest, then the portion of the Himachal, and then the one which has been created quite early, that is the Great Himalayas. So these are your thrust faults. This is what is your MCT. This is what is the MBT. And this is here the thrust fault which has been created. That is what is HFF or Himalayan frontal fault. Now, when the plate movement still continues to happen, as a consequence of that, what will be the outcome? The height will continue to increase. And wherever this thrust fault is still active, there will be some movement happening across these thrust fault areas as well. So that is a common factor that you will observe. So that is why you observe significant amount of earthquakes or seismic activities. All the seismic activities that you would have heard of in the Himalayan ranges, they happen due to movement across these areas. For a long period of time, there has not been a considerable movement across MCT anymore. The Kathmandu earthquake, which rocked the entire region of Nepal in 2015, whose impact could be felt even in the region of northern portion of India. That Kathmandu earthquake happened due to movement across MBT. Then the HFF, the Assam earthquakes that you come across, the Kangra earthquakes that you come across, the Bihar earthquake that you had in 1934, all these massive earthquakes that keep on happening periodically, that is because of movement across HFF. So that tells you that over a period of time, if this movement keeps on continuing, all these areas, they will continue to grow taller. They will continue to grow taller, and there will be a kind of fourth range of Himalayas which will come up in the process. So initially the thrust fault would have developed immediately after the first range of great Himalayas. That is where a limit to the amount of deformation would have been reached, and there would have been a development of a thrust fault here. After the development of a thrust fault, then the folding of the other portion would have started, creating a second fold, and that is the middle Himalayas, and a thrust fault beyond that. Then after that, this process would have continued, development of a third fold, and a kind of a fault before that as well. Many of you who have joined the sessions late, you would not be very well versed with the portion of the formation of Himalayas. So I would urge all of you guys to go back to the recordings of the second module that we had discussed, the third module rather, where we had discussed about in different stages about the process of formation of Himalayas. We had discussed the 6 stages, if you recall, all the 6 stages, where we had discussed why there is a kind of a fault line getting created there. Okay. Now, so that means there's a fourth range of Himalayas which will continue to come up. Okay. Now, let us take a look at these ranges one by one. If the northern side of Indian plate collided first, which means it should apply more compressive force, then why the Himalayas are wider in Kashmir? That is what I told you already earlier, Chitranshu, that basically here MCT to HFF is north to south. Please take a look at this. This is your greater or inner Himalayas. That is where in between the Himadri and Himachal you have the MCT. Here between the Himachal and the Shivalik you have the MBT. And between the Shivalik and the outer Gangetic plains or the Indo-Gangetic plains, that is where you have the HFF. Okay. Is that understood, Divyanshi? Shalja, what do you mean that it is not added in the state list? Ladakh is a union territory, isn't it? Isn't Ladakh a union territory? Are we aware of that? Then what do we mean by not added to the state list? Please clarify. When I told you to clarify, you are basically repeating the same thing. Okay. Here, Chitranshu, you had asked a question. So that is what I was trying to convey here. So basically, this is where in the northwestern part, the collision started. So that collision happened, but that provided a sudden swivel and a greater amount of compression in the eastern and the northeastern side. So that is the swivel which put forward a kind of a greater compressive force in the northeastern and the eastern side. If the compressive force would have been uniform, the shape of the Himalayas would have been a straight line. But that is not what you observe. You observe the shape of the Himalayas to be a slightly convex form. That tells you that there was an increased push happening from the side, which has led to that kind of a shape and a syntaxial bend. Is that understood, Chitranshu? I'm asking where it starts, where it says start and then going. This is where you will have the HFF. In this region, you have the HFF. HFF will also have its various different sub faults which are present there. This is where you have HFF. This is where you have the MBT carrying on. Then you have the MCT. So that is where you have the MBT, MCT, and HFF. Is that understood now? Or is there still a doubt? Is it clear? What was the doubt in this? Okay. Himalayas is a result of the recumbent fold mountain. When we talk about the folds, recumbent fold, nappy fold, in Himalayas, you will find the presymmetrical fold. In the region of Shivaliks, you will find the presence of asymmetrical fold as well. Earlier also, we had discussed about it when we were discussing it in module 4, that when you have a mountain setup, the mountain will look like this, but underneath the rocks can have a compressed structure like this as well. They can have a structure like this as well. So within the Himalayas, you will find the example of the nappy fold as well, the recumbent fold as well, the asymmetrical fold as well, the symmetrical fold as well. Is that understood now? Right? So now we take a look at the various different portions. Okay. Basu, kindly revise the portion of the folds and faults once again. Symmetrical fold is possible in Himalayas in the region of the Shivaliks, where the folding has been happening not for a very long time, but happening very recently. Now, when we talk about the Himadri, now Himadri is the northernmost range of the Himalayan, the three ranges of the Himalayas that we consider. Himadri is considered to be the northernmost. It is the tallest out there, because it is the range which has experienced a compression for the longest duration of time. And it is also the tallest mountain range across the world, having many peaks with a height of more than 7,000 meters. Across the parts of the world, you won't find peaks more than 7,000 meters above sea level. Here, not only do you have many peaks above 7,000, you have a few peaks even above 8,000 meters above sea level. Now, these are very, very narrow. Narrow because there is a significant compression. Okay, so it is the most continuous range consisting of the loftiest peaks with an average height of 6,000 meters and a width of 25 kilometers. Fold of the Great Himalayas, they are asymmetrical in nature, right? It is in the Great Himalayas where you will also find the example of recumbent fold. Here you will also find the example of the nappy fold. All of that you will find here. Now, these are the few of the tallest peaks out there. In the region of the Great Himalayas, you will find you have Mount Everest, right? 8848. Then Kanchenjunga, the third tallest peak in the world, 8598. Makalu, Dholagiri, Nanga Parbat, Annapurna, which is considered to be one of the most punishing mountain range when it comes to climbing. It is said that it is easier to climb Mount Everest, much easier to climb Mount Everest than to climb Annapurna. Then Nanda Devi, Kamet, Namcha Barwa, Gurla Mandhata, all of these, they are basically a part of the Great Himalayas. Okay, so that is where you have the Great Himalayas and their properties. Now, after the Great Himalayas, you have the Himachal or the Lesser Himalayas. Now, this is the range lying to the south of the Himadri. It forms the rugged mountain system. Now, they are composed of highly compressed and altered rocks in general. Now, here, the Great Himalayas or Himadri, their formation was initiated almost 55 to 60 million years back. That is when it is said that the folding had initiated, long time back. Now, when we talk about the region of Himachal, there the folding is said to have been initiated around 40 million years back. But the folding of Shivalik was something which was initiated only around 10 to 15 to 20 million years back. So that means for a good span of 10 to 20 million years and more, you had the existence of two mountain ranges. That is the Himadri, followed by the Himachal. So you had the existence of two mountain ranges, for a good span of 10 to 20 million years. 10 to 20 million years. It is a very, very long period of time. So obviously in that period of time, many of the river systems, they would come into existence, they would come here, they would drain all their deposits in this region. All the deposits would be given here. So the sedimentary rocks, the sedimentary soil, all of them you would find here. So when the folding started for the formation of Shivalik, that is when all these deposits, they also indicated a fold. That is why it is said that Shivaliks are nothing but the deposits brought by the rivers which once originated from the Great and the Middle Himalayas. Right? It is those portions which have been folded. While in the Great Himalayas, you will also find the evidence of Tethys Sea. You will find many of the marine deposits to be present in the region of Great Himalayas. Okay? Now, all the various different famous hill stations out there, many of them, Dalhousie, then you have Lansdowne, then you have various different hill stations. They are situated in the region of the Himachal or the Middle Himalayas. Okay, so here you will find many of the picturesque areas. So the Himalayan ranges or the Middle Himalayas, they are named differently as you move ahead. They are named differently in different parts of the country. So Pir Panjal range forms the longest and the most important range that is present in the northwestern part. Then as you enter into the portion of Himachal Pradesh, there the Middle Himalayas are known by the name of the Dhauladhar ranges. Then in the portion of eastern Uttarakhand and in the portion of Nepal, that is where you have the Mahabharat Lake ranges. These are the prominent ones. Here it consists of the famous valley of Kashmir, the Kangra and the Kulu Valley in Himachal, and the various different hill stations. One of you were asking about the Char Dhams, Kedarnath, Badrinath, etc., lies across the Middle Himalayas as well. Okay? Now, then comes the Shivaliks, the outermost fold, the latest of the fold. Now, the Shivaliks here, basically, they are the outermost range of the Himalayas. They extend over a width of 10 to 50 kilometers with an altitude of roughly around 2000 meters above sea level, 2,500 meters above sea level. It is composed of unconsolidated sediments brought down by rivers from the main Himalayan ranges located far to the north. Okay, so composed of unconsolidated. Unconsolidated means what? Something which has not been arranged in layers, where you have the presence of soil along with rock itself, then further more soil or rock. It is mixed together, hodgepodge. It is not consolidated in the structured format. So, unconsolidated sediments brought down by the rivers from the main Himalayan ranges located far north, that is the Himachal and the Himadri. Now, this is also named differently in different parts. It is named as Jammu Hills in the region of Jammu Kashmir, then Dhang Range and Dundwa Range in Uttarakhand, parts of Himachal, Churia Ghat Hills of Nepal, and further east in the region of Arunachal Pradesh, it is named as Dafla, Miri, Abor, Mishmi, all these names given after the tribes which reside in those areas. So that is how the names are given. Okay. Now, let us take a look at few of the landforms that you will observe to be in existence across these ranges, across the region of the Himalayas. So, for example, here you have the dunes and the duars. Dunes and duars, they exist between the lesser Himalaya and the Shivaliks. Okay. Now, before you start getting confused, both of them are the same feature. Both dunes and duars, they represent the same kind of geographical feature. The geographical feature, when it exists or exhibits itself in the region of Western Himalayas, it is referred to as dune. When this geographical feature exhibits itself in the region of Eastern Himalayas, it is referred to as duars. So here, both of them, both represent the same geographical depositional feature. Okay. Dunes in Western Himalayas, duars in Eastern Himalayas. Yes, Mayank, that is correct. So what are dunes? What are duars? So when we talk about dunes and duars, both of them are depositional features. They are very small in size. They are not very large in size, in the sense that they are not encompassing many hundreds of kilometers. They are localized phenomena. That is, for a few kilometers they will extend. These deposits are for few kilometers. So these are the valley deposits which have happened. And how have they happened? Understand the phenomena. So here, when we talk about, let's say, the formation of the shivaliks. So at the time of the formation of the shivaliks, you already had a range to the north, that is the mid Himalayas or the Himachal. Now from the Himachal ranges, obviously, few of the smaller rivers and streams would originate, they would flow, right? I'm not talking about the very large and powerful rivers and streams, but the smaller ones, right? They would originate and flow. Now they would carry out their deposits. Now, in certain places, not across uniformity, but in certain places, what happened was that there was an upfolding which happened right across this path of the river. If it would have been a very major river, it would have cut through that upfolding. But we are talking about the small streams. So the upfolding for the Shivalik, that started happening right across the path. Here, that upfolding began. So, as the upfolding for the Shivaliks happened, what would happen to the river water? The flow of the river water would get blocked significantly. The flow of the river water would get blocked. The river water would get accumulated. Now, over a period of time, all this river water got accumulated. And this was still a very localized phenomena. Now here, I want you to relate to the shape of the mountain. Mountain is much broader at the bottom. Mountain is very narrow at the top. So as the water level of blockade rises up, if it comes closer to the top, what happens? Water will flow from the side, isn't it? That is something which is going to happen as long as it is moving to the, or as long as it is restricted to the bottom. There you will have the water which can get stored, accumulated between the ranges. But if the water level starts coming higher up, water will immediately exit from the sides. Now, as long as this river water got accumulated, there, this river carried out its deposits as well. This would carry out significant amount of deposits as well. Now, these deposits, they kept on increasing in height and size. Now, also, if you take a look at the Himalayan rivers, they bring in huge amount of deposits. So these deposits, they keep on getting accumulated. Water level would go up. Eventually, what would happen? The water would flow from the side. The river would find its own pathway to flow. the water would be flowing from the sides, and you would be left behind by these flattish deposits. So these kind of flattish deposits that would have happened, that is referred to as dune or duar. That is, if this deposit is exhibited or indicated in the western portion of Himalayas, it is referred to as the dunes, such as Kotli Dune, Patli Dune, Dehradun. If it is observed in the region of eastern Himalayas, it is represented by the term duar. That is why if you ever have been to Dehradun, if you belong from Dehradun, so if you stand at any place in Dehradun, there you would observe it is a flattish portion. It is having a slope and all, but it has got a large flattish portion. But all around it, if you observe, it is surrounded by lofty peaks and mountains, which tells you that earlier this would have been a valley and there has been a deposit created. That is why in Dehradun cultivation is also observed. Right? So that is what you have as the case of dunes and duars. I will repeat it again. So these are localized deposits which are created between the region of the Himachal and the Shivalik. Earlier, before the folding of the Shivalik, you had many small streams, small rivers which would flow from the region of the Himachal into the plains. Now, in certain areas, the folding of the Shivalik managed to block these small rivers, not the large rivers, small rivers. Now, as the river water started accumulating, with that started accumulating the amount of deposit as well. Eventually, when the water level rose, it exited from the sides. The river found its pathway from the side, leaving those deposits behind. And those depositional features that you observe in the western Himalayas, they are referred to as dunes. In the eastern Himalayas, they are referred to as duars. Okay? So now, let us take a break, and we'll take a break. We'll be back by around 7, and then we will continue further. Okay, let's take a break here. Okay, so this is about the creation and the existence of various different dunes and duars. Okay, then you also have the creation of a certain kind of a feature which is referred to as kos or chos in those areas. Now, this is observed in the southern faces of the Shivaliks, and that too in the western Himalayas. So, this is when we talk about the western Himalayas, southern slope of Shivalik in western Himalayas. Now, how are they created? What is the basis of their creation? What is the basis of their formation overall? So basically, when we take a look at the side view of the southern slope, now southern slope as per the hogback topography will represent a steeper slope, right? So there is a steep southern slope and a gentle northern slope which is attributed. Now, in this area of a steep southern slope, we receive during the monsoon and the rainy season, you have incessant and significant amount of rainfall which is caused, lot of cloud formation, and lot of rainfall does occur. Now, this significant rainfall, it gives rise to seasonal streams. Rains during the monsoons, they give rise to seasonal streams. Multiple seasonal streams. Okay. They give rise to multiple different seasonal streams. So if I indicate the front or a kind of a face view of the southern slope, so if you can imagine the southern slope, now due to this sudden rainfall, you will have multiple different stream formation. Multiple different stream formation. They would dissect the slope. They would erode these areas and they would dissect the slope into multiple smaller portions. Okay, so that is what they would do. And thereby, these are the dissected seasonal streams that you come across, and it creates a denudational or an erosional structure across the southern slope that is referred to as chos. And this is observed only in the region of the western part, that is across the Punjab Himalayas, across the Himachal Himalayas. In those areas across the southern slope of Shivalik, you will have that. Okay, right? Is that understood now? Abhishek, confused between the southern and the northern slope. So the side facing towards the south is the southern slope. So the Himalayas, they are east to west ranges. So you will have a side facing the south, a side facing the north. So northern and the southern slope comes accordingly. Okay. So here, the southern slope of this range are almost completely devoid of forest cover in Punjab and Himachal Pradesh and are highly dissected by several seasonal streams locally known as chos. So that is how they get created, particularly during the rainy season. Okay. Now, then we come across a unique depositional feature, very similar to the depositional feature that you observe in the forms of dunes and duars. But here, this depositional feature has happened in between the Great Himalayas, the Trans Himalayas, and the region of the Middle Himalayas. So that is where this deposit has happened. Now, this has happened also over a very large region. As compared to dunes and duars, karevas are very large depositional features, right? So these karevas, where are they present? They are present in the region of the Jammu and Kashmir. So it lies in between the Trans, that is the Zaskar range, and the Great Himalayas. And then on the other side, you have the presence of the Pir Panjal range, that is the portion of the Middle Himalayas. So in between them, on one side you have the Zaskar and the Himadri, and then on the other side you have the presence of the Pir Panjal. In between them you have these deposits. So how did these deposits come into place? So they also occurred because of the restriction of the river flow in this area due to the upliftment of the Pir Panjal range. So here, these are long depositional features, or large, much larger than a dune or a dwar. So they can exist for many kilometers. In fact, the extent is even for around 500 kilometers in certain cases. They are dissected over a period of the length or a distance, but there is a significantly larger deposits. So these are large depositional features. So here, on one side, you had the Trans and the Great Himalayas. On the other side, you had the presence of Middle Himalayas. Okay, the Pir Panjal. So the rivers which would originate from this region, from the region of the Great or the Trans-Himalayan region, all these rivers, their water would start to accumulate. The water of these rivers would begin to accumulate. Okay. Now, this accumulation would happen across a very large area. And for a temporary period, it ended up creating a very ultra large lake of sorts, a lake which would be spread over a very large region. Obviously, when you have such a creation or such a feature which is created, then automatically along with it, you will also have the existence of the deposits that these rivers would bring. So these deposits basically, they are also referred to as lacustrine deposits. Lacustrine as in any deposit which is carried out in the presence of a lake, that is what is a lacustrine deposit. Of very fine sediments, very fine soil particles, they would get deposited here in between. Okay, eventually, all that water which was accumulated, it exited this portion of accumulation from the Baramulla Gorge. Baramulla, I hope we have heard about the name Baramulla. Very important historical trading point and trading center. So that is where, from the region of Baramulla Gorge, all that excessive water, it drained out. And when the water drained out, it left behind these deposits. Very fertile deposits were left behind. So here you had deposits of very fine particles, lacustrine deposits, lacustrine deposits. Lacustrine deposits indicate deposits created by lakes. So that is what is referred to as the lacustrine deposit. So these are very fine particles, and they end up representing a majority of the part of the valley in the region of Jammu Kashmir. And these are very, very fertile. So they are very fertile. Very fertile. So that is where agriculture is chiefly carried out in these areas. And even within agriculture, particularly the growth of fruits, and you will have a lot of fruit orchards. Along with that, you will observe the growth of saffron, right? So saffron is something which is grown here. So cultivation of fruits, saffron, etc. is carried out. Okay. The costliest spice in the world. That is what saffron is well known for. Which is the largest producer of saffron in the world? The largest producer of saffron? Very good. It is Iran. Iran is the largest producer of saffron. Okay? Yes. Difference between dunes and karevas, that is what I already told you. Dunes and duars, they have also been created in the same process. The difference is that there the deposits have happened in a very small localized area, where here the deposits have happened over a very large space. In the case of Dooms and Duars, the deposits have been carried out in between the middle Himalayas and the Shivaliks. In the case of the Karevas, they have been carried out between the Trans and the Great Himalayas on one side and the middle Himalayas on the other side. So that is where it is a localized phenomena in the region of Jammu Kashmir itself. Okay, so that is basically the Karevas. Now then, in the case particularly of the middle Himalayas, you will come across the phenomena where at a greater height of 3,000, 4,000 meters above sea level, the temperature is so low that you won't have dense vegetation anymore. Rather than the vegetation of lot of trees, there you will find the presence of grasslands, the grasses, the temperate grasses which are present. So at these great heights, you will have the presence of lot of various different grasses. So that is what you refer to as the bugyals. So basically, again I will say, so in particularly in the region of the middle Himalayas, at greater altitude around 3,000 to 4,000 meters above sea level, you will find the presence of these grasslands. Now these grasses are something which are prominent during the summer season, not to be found during the winter season, because in winter season this entire stretch will be covered in thick deposit of snow and ice. During the summer season, when everything melts, that is when these grasses will start to grow. So these temporary summer grasslands which are created at greater altitude, they are referred to as bugyals. Now these bugyals are used in great proportion by the pastoralists, by the nomads in existence. They actually use these grasses, they use these grasslands. So here when we talk about the bugyals, basically you will observe that they are used by the pastoralists and the herders, the ones who have a lot of animals that they take care of. So they will carry a lot of these animals at these greater heights during the summer season. They will continue to graze, and once the winter season starts setting in, along with all their animals, they will come down to the lower level of the hill slopes in order to escape the harsh winter. So this is a kind of a nomadic occupation which is carried out, where you don't have a fixed base. So there they continue to move up during the summer along with all their various different animals that they have, sheep, goats, etc. And again they will come down, and it is with the help of these animals and animal products that they make their living, the pastoralists. So these nomadic pastoralists, they carry out an activity which is referred to as transhumanes. So they carry out what is referred to as transhumanes. Yes, like the Banjaras. Transhumanes. Transhumanes indicates periodic or seasonal migration carried by the pastoralists to ensure or rather to provide grazing by animals. So various different tribes, they carry out these transhumans. For example, you will observe that the Bhotias, they also indulge in that. So various different tribes, they carry out this. So you have, for example, the case of the Gurjars, Bakarwals, Bakarwals are to be found in which area? Traditionally in the region of Jammu Kashmir. Then you have Bhotias, Okay, all of them, they carry out this. You have multiple other tribes as well. They carry out this activity of transhumanes around these regions of bugyals. So bugyals are the grasslands, the summer grasslands in the higher reaches. And there, during the winter season, you will experience the presence of ice and snow. During the summer, you will have the presence of these grasses. Okay, then in the eastern part of the country, that is, in the eastern border of the country, you will again observe the presence of the Himalayas, or rather the mountains in the north to south direction. Now, these are also fold mountains. You have the Patkai Bam, the Naga Hills, the Mizo or the Lushai Hills. Now, these are north to south. So, here also, you have the fold mountain which has been created due to that eastward and northeastward push of the Indian plate that we have discussed. So here also you have these fold mountains which have been created along with the formation of Arakan Yoma, Pegu Yoma on the side of Myanmar. Here also you have these mountains. However, the Garo Khasi Jayantia region, that is not considered to be part of the Himalayan stretches and the Himalayan reaches. So Garo Khasi Jayantia is not considered to be a part of that. It is considered to be a part of Peninsular Plateau, not a part of the Himalayas. Okay. Now, then we come to the portion of the northern plains. We come to the formation of northern plains. So northern plains, they end up representing one of the most fertile stretches of land across the country and even across the world. This represents one of the most fertile stretches of land out which is out there. So that is where you have the presence of northern plains. Now, in many of these areas, the height of the northern plains is close to around sea level, or maybe 100 meters above sea level, or 150 meters above sea level, or 200 meters above sea level. That is it. But then, in many of these areas, if you find out the depth of the sediments, in many of these reaches, the depth of the sediment is close to around 2 kilometers from the surface, 2.5 kilometers from the surface. So, how is it possible that you have the deposits of sediments which are as deep as 2 kilometers and now have come to the level of the sea? So, that means going back in history, this region would have been a depression. So, here the formation of northern plains. There have been various different theories which have been formulated by the various different geographers for a long period of time, that how these northern plains would have come into existence, how they have come, how they would have uh, been formed in general. But you will observe that it was Edward Seuss' theory of four deep, the concept of four deep, which was provided by Edward Seuss, which offers a relevant explanation for how is it that the northern plains came into formation. So we talk about the case of the concept of four deep. Four deep. That is provided by Edward Seuss. Now, four deep means what? A kind of a depression in front, right? So, a kind of a depression like feature which has been created. So, how is it that this four deep would have come into existence? What is this four deep? So, what Edward Hughes said that look, as the Indian plate collided with the Eurasian landmass, there would not have been only the upfold. Wherever you have an upfold, in order to accommodate that, in order to have a balance, there is a kind of a downward fold which is created as well. So that downward fold would have been created to the south of Himalayas. So he said that look, here, when you have, let's suppose, the Indian plate colliding, you had the region of the Peninsular Plateau, which was already in existence. Peninsular Plateau would consist of very hard rocks. Now, the folding would have happened, creating the Himalayan ranges. Okay. And then here, four deep. That is a depression or a geosyncline created due to the process of folding right, where the upfolds represent the mountains of Himalayas and the depression exists to the south of it. Okay, the depression exists to the south of it. So here you have, let's suppose, the flow of a river. Now you had various rivers originating from the mountains. Amongst the rivers, the larger ones, that is the Indus, Ganga, Brahmaputra, which together they are also referred to as the Indo-Brahm rivers. Now these rivers would have drained into this region, filling the foredeep with various different sediments. So that is where these sediments would have, you have the sedimentary deposits. So that is why these deposits in certain region, they have a depth of around 1 kilometer, in certain areas 500 meters, in certain areas even 2 kilometers or more. So that is basically what is observed. Okay, so this foredeep was filled with the sediments brought by the Himalayan rivers, and those sediments, they form the northern plains. Okay, so you have deposits brought by the Himalayan rivers. Okay, brought by the Himalayan rivers in general. So that is what has formed the region of the northern plain. So this is your peninsular part of the country. This is the Peninsular Plateau. This is the hard rock of the Peninsular Plateau. Then this is where you have the Himalayas. In between the Himalayas and the Peninsular Plateau, you have the northern plains. It is these northern plains that we refer to as the Indo-Gangetic plains as well. This is where you have the northern plains. Okay. Now, after this, here basically, when we talk about these northern plains, they are formed by alluvial deposits brought by the rivers, that is the Indus, Ganga, and the Brahmaputra. They extend approximately 3,200 kilometers to the east and to the west. Average width is around 150 to 300 kilometers in general. The maximum depth of alluvial deposit varies between 1,000 to 2,000 meters. Now here also, as you come to the south of the foothills, it is not as if, let's suppose this is the foothills of the Himalayas. It is not as if from immediately the foothills to the entirety of the stretch of the northern plain, you will have uniform structure. No, the kind of deposits that you find immediately at the base will be different. The kind of deposit that you will find after some time, that will be different. So even the kind of deposits that are in existence, they will be significantly and sufficiently different. So there's a classification of the northern plains as well, based upon the type of deposits which are to be found. So that is the classification here. So here you will find the classification on the basis of deposits. Classification based on the type of deposits. Okay, so that is what is observed here. Now, basically, when we talk about the deposits, how is it that the deposits are different? Let us understand that. So, here, first of all, you will find that immediately at the foothills, let's suppose this is a mountain. Okay. Now, if a river is flowing here, it is after all the rivers which carry out all these deposits. So, let's suppose a river is flowing from here. Let's suppose. Now, in this stage, as the river is moving, as the river is flowing, we can say that the river will be carrying very large particles, rock boulders, large rock pieces, large size of rocks it will carry. Now, immediately after reaching and hitting the plains, will the river be able to carry those boulders and rocks any further? No. There will be a kind of a limitation observed. There will be a significant limitation which is caused. So here, immediately as you encounter or enter the foothills, all those large rock boulders, they will get deposited. Yes, very similar to that of a alluvial fan. All these large rocky pieces, which have been brought slowly and steadily by the rivers, they will get deposited. And immediately, in the many of the times in the river channel itself, on top of each other, these rocks, they find their deposits. If ever, not during the rainy season, during the dry season, if ever you get a chance to visit the reaches around Rishikesh and in between Rishikesh and Haridwar, you will come across many of these formations. And even in Himachal Pradesh, even in Sikkim, you will observe this. So here, the river will continue to flow, the river will continue to move, but will be moving underneath these. The river will continue to move through here. Now, if someone, let's say, takes a look or a view at this from a top view, let's suppose you take a top view of this. So from a top view, you won't even be able to see the river because all these rocks and boulders, they will be blocking the view of your river flow. So from top, the river won't even be visible significantly. The river flow will be hidden. So here you will find that these are the rocky terrains. So these rocky tracts or rocky terrains, they are referred to as bhabar. However, if you happen to go into any such area, the sound of the river is something that you will always hear. But many of the times, it is only the small streams that you will be able to see because the water flow is hidden by the rocks deposited on top of them. Now, can you carry out cultivation or agriculture in this area? What do you think? No? Can you carry out cultivation in this area? Obviously, no. So agriculture is not to be carried out. But you will find the random appearance of trees here and there, even though that won't be in great density. But this is a region not at all fit for cultivation purpose. This is a region which is not at all adequate for agricultural purpose here. So, not fit for cultivation or agriculture. Not fit for cultivation or agriculture. But you will find random trees here and there. Now, immediately after that, as the river comes out of the region where you have these deposits of these rocks. Now, immediately after that, river will come out into an area where you don't have a predefined river channel. A predefined river channel means, what is a river channel? The pathway in which the river flows. So, for example, take any river, Godavari, Kaveri, Krishna, Ganga, Brahmaputra, they have a definite channel in which they flow. But immediately to the south of these Bhabar, you are still in the region of the foothills. You're not very far away from the mountains. Here, when the river comes out, it comes out in an area where you don't have a demarcated river channel. So if you don't have a particular channel in which the river can flow, what will you observe? That the river in itself will divide into multiple different streams. All these streams later can combine together, but immediately you'll find that the river in itself will divide itself into various different streams. Okay? Various and multiple of these streams. Now, here, after some time, when it comes into a perfect plain region, there it will come back, all of these will combine to form one unified stream through which the river will flow, where you have the river channel, where the river will flow. But in between these tracts, in between this area, this region, the river has divided itself into multiple smaller streams because it doesn't have a designated pathway through which it can flow. So multiple different pathways it will keep on flowing. Eventually, all of them will meet into a river stream again. But here, what do you observe in general? When we talk about the soil moisture level presence in the soil. So the moisture level presence in the soil here will be high or will it be low? What do you think? It will be very high, isn't it? Yes. So in this region, the moisture level will be very high. Perfect. So where the moisture level of soil is higher, what can we expect in terms of the soil characteristics? Slightly marshy and muddy in nature. What about the plant growth? You will expect a very dense growth of vegetation in this area. So this is the region which is referred to as the Tarai belt. The Tarai belt. Tarai belt. So here basically soil is fertile, very dense vegetation. Now, where you have very dense vegetation, obviously, animals also come in. So, this is the region that you have the Rajaji National Park, the Corbett National Park. All of them, they exist in the Tarai Belt. The latest elephant reserve to be declared in our country. Now, in total, we have 33 elephant reserves in the country. The latest elephant reserve to be added is the Tarai Elephant Reserve. Right. So, that is the Tarai Belt, densely vegetated. Now, these areas have always been so in the northern portion of Uttar Pradesh, some northern tracts in certain areas of Bihar, northern Bengal, northern Assam. They consist some portions in Uttarakhand. They represent the Tarai belt, southern portion of Uttarakhand, that is. They represent the Tarai belt. Now, they would be very densely forested, very dense vegetation. It was during the time of the British rule when this area was significantly and systematically deforested. Large tracts of it were deforested because otherwise, around 200 years back to 50 years back, this entire stretch that we are talking about, that would be dominant in tigers, very large numbers, elephants, rhinos, all of them would be found in very large numbers. But all the numbers observed a kind of a decline. right? So that is because of deforestation. Now, why that deforestation was carried out by the Britishers? Primarily for two reasons. The major reason was that you had the manufacturing of the railway sleepers that you had, right? The railway, in between the railway tracks, you would observe these flat pieces which hold the railway track in its place. That is the railway sleepers. Earlier you had them being manufactured from wood. So for the manufacturing of railway sleepers, as you had a greater onset of railway network and an expansion of railway network which was happening, that is where these were required. And also for utilization in the paper industry. So that is also where and why a lot of deforestation was carried out. Then after some time, even for expansion and extension of agriculture, many of these areas have been deforested. Now, as a result of deforestation, obviously, these areas have become very prone to floods, because when you have the forests, the soil have the natural ability to soak in excess water. You remove the forest, even small amount of water will start overflowing along with the topsoil. So that creates and exaggerates the problem of the floods nowadays. Okay. So here, this is basically the Tarai belt. Yes, also prone to malaria and these diseases. Now we come to the portion which is referred to as the alluvial plains. These are the stretches where you have the alluvial plains. Now there's a classification in the alluvial plains as well. Let us understand that basic classification. So here, when you talk about the plain region, for example, let's suppose here you have the river channel in existence. Okay, this is the river channel. Now let's assume it is obviously going to be in the river channel itself where the river is going to flow. This is where the river is flowing. Now, as the river is flowing, it will continue to bring its deposits along with it. It will continue to bring the deposits. Now, it might also happen that sometimes the river gets flooded. But even if it doesn't get flooded, the deposits you will find continuously being dumped in the surrounding areas of the river, few kilometers, few tens of kilometers from the riverside, the deposits will be continuously dumped. So these are the newer deposits which are carried out on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. These are the deposits which are brought by the river. But let's suppose every 100 years or 500 years, the river would have flooded to an extent or an extremity where, let's suppose, the river would have gotten flooded to an extent where the river water would have come to very far off places. The river water let's suppose 200 years ago or 100 years ago, a flood has occurred where the entire floodplain is drowned upon. Now, in these situations, the deposits will be carried out even in these areas. The deposits would be carried out even in these areas. Now, these deposits, they are not getting replenished on a daily basis. These deposits, they were created once when the river flooded. But then after that, these deposits are not getting replenished on a daily basis, on a regular basis. So these are referred to as the older deposits, which have been created long time back. Right. Now, older deposits means they have been created very long time back. So understand the basic science behind it. So let's suppose in a region you have these deposits. which have occurred a long time back. For a long period of time, you have these deposits in place for a particular depth as well. Now, would I be correct to assume that the top portion will exert its weight to the bottom areas? I would be correct to presume that the top portion will exert its weight to the bottom portion of the soil here, isn't it? Now, many of the particles brought by the rivers, they consist of small amount of calcium. So when there is a pressure exerted, that can also be a possibility that the calcium starts getting secreted. Calcium has got a binding property, so it will join with the other particles. 2 or 3 particles will start getting together. 2 or 3 particles, they will start getting together, isn't it? So what will be the grain size of these deposits? The size of the individual particles of this? They will be slightly larger. So here you have the coarse grains. Coarse grains. Soil structure. So when the soil has got larger grain size, it won't have the ability to trap air and water in between. Excess amount of water will immediately be drained out. So coarse grained soil is never considered to be fertile. So in older deposits, you will find these older deposits, they are referred to as bhangar. Right? They are referred to as bhangar. So here you will observe that only certain crops such as maybe pulses, maize, only these, in certain cases even oil seeds, only they can be grown, where lot amount of crops cannot be grown here. So crops such as like pulses, then you have maize, etc. are grown. Okay, that is what is observed in this case. Then here you have the newer deposits. These are your newer deposits. Newer deposits. That is the deposits which are carried out on a daily basis by the river. So here you will find the particle size to be very small. They have been brought by the river immediately and deposited in the region. So the particle size is also small here, and they are very, very fertile at the same time. So these are very fertile. These are referred to as khadar. These are referred to as khadar. These are, bhangar is less fertile because it is the older deposit. Less fertile. And this is much more fertile, very fertile. So almost all the various different types of crops, rice, wheat, even maize, pulses, etc., any kind of crop that you consider will be always found to be grown in khadar. Crops such as jute, they can grow only in the fresh alluvium. That is why jute, you will observe that it grows particularly well in the floodplains where regular floodings happen, because that brings in the fine sediments. So that means closer that you are to the river, that is where you will find the fresh alluvium. Further away that you are from the river, that is where you will find the older alluvium. Fresh alluvium is the khadar. Older deposit is referred to as the bhangar, and bhangar is where you will have the larger particles, right? Then here, one by one, let us take a look into it. So the narrow belt of 8 to 10 kilometer parallel to the Shivalik foothills, that is the Bhabar. Okay, these are the large deposits that you have. This is your Bhabar. Then the rivers disappear in the zone as the rivers deposit heavy materials of rocks and boulders. Basically, it is not as if the river vanishes, it is that the river in itself won't be seen so much because the rivers are hidden behind these massive or underneath those massive boulders. The area is not suitable for agriculture. Then the Tarai lies to the south of Bhabar. Approximate width is 10 to 20 kilometers. Streams and rivers re-emerge without any properly demarcated channel. So that is why the soil is saturated with moisture content, very rich in biodiversity, significant amount of dense vegetation, and also you will find that it is very apt and suitable for cultivation as well. So marshy and swampy conditions, they are known as the Tarai. Luxurious growth of natural vegetation, and houses a varied wildlife. Okay. Then the alluvial plains. The alluvial plains, they are classified into newer deposit, that is the Khadar, and the older deposit, that is the Bhangar. This is the fertile newer deposit. Right, this is Bhangar, is the older alluvium. Older alluvium which are formed at the terraces of the floodplain far away from the river. So they are formed far away from the river channel in the terraces of the floodplain, where they might have been deposited 100 years back, 150 years back, etc. There generally the size of the particles are larger. Oftentimes you will find that there is calcium which helps in binding of the particles. So they are impregnated with calcareous concretions of calcium, which are referred to as conchers in that area. So that is why in many of your grains of food that you buy, the food grains that you buy from the market, you'll find that before preparing them, before grinding them, oftentimes they are sieved through carefully so that these conchers are removed. The larger impurities, they are removed. So you would have observed these conchers in general. Now that is about the northern plains. Now the northern plains themselves, they also have a regional division. Northern plains, they are widest in the west and narrowest in the east. Okay, so they are the widest in the west around the region of Haryana, Punjab, and the region of Delhi, Western UP. That is where the northern plains are the widest. So they are the widest in the west, and they are narrowest in the east. And that is largely to do with the shape of the peninsular plateau in itself. Okay, around the eastern portion of Jharkhand and eastern part of Bihar and parts of West Bengal, that is where you have the Raj Mahal ranges. That is where it comes to its narrowest extent. So that is where you will have the plains also getting very, very narrow. And then in the west, you don't have this case. That is why the rivers, they form a wider deposit. So the, for example, the Gangetic plains, the northern plains, they have the regional division as well. For example, in the western part of the country, you have the Indo-Gangetic plains. Then you have the upper Ganga plain in the region of western part of Uttar Pradesh. Then in the central part of the Uttar Pradesh and also eastern part of Uttar Pradesh, you have the middle Ganga plain. Then in the portion of Bihar and then West Bengal, it is the lower Ganga plain. Lower Ganga plain is also referred to as the Rad plains in general. So lower Ganga plains, they have the name as Rad plains. That is the region of the deposit around West Bengal. So this is the name associated with lower Ganga plains in West Bengal. Okay, so there you have a, now if I ask you that as compared to upper Ganga plain, middle Ganga plain, and the lower Ganga or the Rad plain, where is it that you will find the finest deposit of the particles? That is the smallest particle which get deposited, where is it that you will find it? Upper, middle, or lower? Beautiful, guys. Very good. It is in these moments that you make me really proud. So it is in the lower part, as all of you have said. It is always going to be present in the lower Ganga plain or the Rar plain. This is where you will have the finest deposits. And the reason is very simple. The larger deposits, they will be deposited or dumped immediately. It is the smaller ones and the smaller particles which will be carried over for a distance. So the smaller deposits, you will find them to be carried on for a greater distance. And that is where even when you consider the deltas, the deltaic deposits, they consist of even finer particles. That is why they are very fertile. Finer the particles, greater is the water and air holding capacity, greater is the amount of fertility associated with the soil. Very good. Okay. Now, after this, we come to the Indian desert, or what is referred to as the Thar desert, western part of Rajasthan. In some parts of Pakistan also, that is your Thar desert. This is also what is referred to as in the local lingo as Marusthali. So what is this desert? Basically, it is a dry desert, dry tropical desert. But why is it that this is a desert? Mind you, it had not always been a desert. If you talk about the history of this particular piece of land, this had not always been a desert. One point of time in history, that is going back billions of years, you had the formation of the Aravalis here. Aravalis are amongst the oldest fold mountains across the world. At one point of time, the height of Aravalis was so much that you had snow-covered peaks, many glaciers which would exist in that area. Many of the rivers would originate and they would deposit multiple particles here. At one point of time, in recent past, that is around 150 million years or 100 million years back, you had this area under dense vegetation. And that is where recently, that is a couple of years back, you even had the discovery of fossils of many dinosaurs, herbivorous dinosaurs, to be found in this area. Herbivore dinosaurs would not have existed in a region where plants don't exist. So this was a region under heavy forests. But then the Indian plate moved north. And when it moved north, we have talked about the period just before the collision between the Indian and the Eurasian landmass, when the Tethyan sea floor was getting uplifted. So much of that water of Tethys Sea, it also came into this region of Rajasthan, western Rajasthan. And many of this area, this entire stretch, this lied underwater for some time. There was a shallow sea which got created, and this area lied underwater around few million years back. That is around 60-70 million years back. This area was under a shallow sea. Now, in the case of a shallow sea, what are the minerals that you end up finding in the regions where you have shallow sea formations? We have discussed this. What are the kind of minerals that you can expect in areas where there had been a shallow sea? Crude oil, very good. Limestone, beautiful. Right? And also sometimes iron. If you remember, we discussed about the deposits of iron, chemical sedimentary rocks. So iron would also be found. So that is why till today, in this region, you will find crude oil deposits, particularly in the region around Bikaner. You will find crude oil deposits. You will find the presence of limestone. When the limestone rock undergoes metamorphosis, what is produced as a result of that? When limestone undergoes metamorphosis, beautiful. You have the formation of marble. That is why the Makrana marbles, Rajasthan is very famous for the marbles. Okay, so that is what I'm trying to tell you. If you understand the process of formation, you will always be able to deduce very naturally the economic portion of geography. right? That which kind of minerals are to be found, why those minerals are to be found. Now, in 2018, UPSC asked a multi statement question about minerals, where it mentioned in a statement that iron is to be found in Rajasthan. Now, majority of the candidates, when they think about Rajasthan, the image as painted by the Bollywood movies, that is what prevails. That it will be kind of like a sandy desert where you have camels, actors and actresses basically running around. So that is the kind of image that they paint. But if you understand the genesis, the basic formation, you will always get an understanding that how this would have been in existence. So here you have iron deposits. In fact, some of the best grade of iron, magnetite ore. You will find limestone, marble, and more importantly, crude oil and natural gas. But then, having said all that, Rajasthan is a desert. Western part of Rajasthan is a desert. Why? What is the reason behind it? The reason is purely attributed to the alignment or the orientation of the Aravallis. If you take a look at the Aravallis here, what is the alignment of the Aravallis? Aravallis roughly are situated like this. Now, when you have the Bay of Bengal branch of monsoon, now Bay of Bengal branch of monsoon will come like this. At one point of time, it is also suggested that these now all this portion not to be asked in your GS paper, but because we are talking about geography, you should be aware of that. So, when you any of you, if you ever have been to the region of Delhi, or if you belong from that area around Haryana, Delhi, Western UP, around the region of Delhi, you have an upraised portion, which is referred to as Delhi Ridge. Okay, the upraised portion, which is not a hill, it is nowhere close to being a hill or a mountain. It is simply where the land is uplifted a bit, and it is consisted of very heavy, very hard rock structure. So that is the Delhi Ridge, where you will nowadays find the scrubs and kind of lot of shrub formation. Right? You would be aware of that? Yes? Good. So that Delhi Ridge, it continues up till the region of Haridwar, what is also referred to as the Delhi Haridwar Ridge. Now, it is said that at one point of time, that would have been the extent of the Aravallis. So that means the Aravallis would have been extended up till the portion of Haridwar. Imagine a kind of a lofty mountain created, a fold mountain. It is the oldest mountain system in India, clear, and amongst the oldest mountains across the world. And that is why it is in these Aravallis. Now, this Aravalli, if I say it is a fold mountain, fold between what? Fold between the landmass which was created much before the entire subcontinent was created. You had patches of land masses which were formed, and these patches, they would collide with the oceans. And that is where, just like you have the continental oceanic collision creating a landmass or creating a fold, so those folds were the Aravallis. They were very lofty. Many large rivers would drain from this area. That is why western portion is dominated by deposits. Now, that is also the reason. Now, where you have a kind of a fold which is created between such a collision, will you be able to find evidences of volcanoes in that area? Yes or no? What do you think? Yes? You'll be able to find the evidences of volcanoes in that area? So that is why in the region around Pataudi, particularly as you move away from Manesar, that is, those of you familiar with that area, that as you move from the region of Delhi into Gurgaon, further, if you move into the region around Pataudi, you will find the volcanic evidences as well. You have very old calderas also situated there. So that gives you an idea about the past, what would have happened there in the past. Okay, but nonetheless, coming back to it, that why it is a desert now. So when you have the Bay of Bengal branch of monsoon. Now, this Bay of Bengal branch of monsoon, will it be able to bring rainfall in the portion of western Rajasthan? No, because it will be on the leeward side, the rain shadow zone. So, no rainfall to be occurred in that area. When you talk about the Arabian Sea branch would simply move by. It would hit here. Here, it would cause some rainfall in southern part of Rajasthan around Mount Abu. Here, you will have the air interacting, causing some amount of rainfall in the east. Not lot, but some amount of rainfall. But what about the region of the western Rajasthan? No orographic barrier. So it will continue to move until and unless it hits the Himalayas. So that is where it will bring rainfall in Himachal, Punjab, Haryana, but not in Rajasthan. So that is why presently the region of Rajasthan is a desert. Okay, so why Rajasthan is a desert? That is where a lot of people, particularly the geographers who have studied Rajasthan in significant detail, who come to that from that area. So they always flaunt upon this particular saying that, Rajasthan sacrifices itself for the greenery of Punjab and Haryana and northern part of the country. Because had the shape of the Aravalis, the direction of the Aravalis been something like this, then all this area would have been green because of the Arabian Sea branch of monsoon, but Punjab, Haryana, etc. would have lied on the leeward side. And you would have dry conditions and deserts in that area. So that is why it is always, now it is not said that much, but it would always colloquially be referred into that area. Those of you belonging from the region of Rajasthan, you would be aware of these, that it is always said that Rajasthan sacrifices, we sacrifice ourselves for the greenery of the north. So, why Rajasthan is a desert? Is a desert. When Aravalis were not there, when there were no Aravali range, Rajasthan was not a desert. My dear friend, you are talking about a time billions of years ago when you did not even have a landmass like India. You had patches of land rather than a larger country or continent that you see in existence now. I'll give you the introduction of how the various landmasses came into existence. I'll give you some idea about that as well. So, here, why Rajasthan is a desert? Due to the alignment of Aravalis. So basically, Arabian Sea branch of monsoon moves parallel to it without any orographic barrier. For the Bay of Bengal branch of monsoon, the western Rajasthan lies on the leeward side or rain shadow zone. Okay, These are the regions. Why presently? Now, earlier, if it would have been present as and when Rajasthan was present around the equatorial area, when Indian plate was moving north, there would have been regular convectional rainfall. So it would not have been a desert. Now it is in the subtropics. Subtropics, you have development of high pressure. That is why earlier also I had told you, look into the map around the same latitudes at which the Rajasthan, the northern plains, etc. lies. You will observe as you move around, or if you take a look into the land areas around these latitudes, they are very dry or desert. Be it western portion of Asia, be it Africa, be it the region of North America, these are desert because these are the subtropical highs. So here the only way that rainfall could have occurred would have been because of orographic barrier. That orographic barrier does not exist, hence no rainfall. So the Indian desert lies to the northwest of the Aravalli Hills. Okay. Now, the land of undulating topography dotted with longitudinal dunes and barchans. So, barchans are what? The crescent shaped dunes, if you remember. Low rainfall below 15 centimeter every year. It has now, what is the average rainfall in India across a year? Average rainfall in India is close to around 120 centimeter per year. So here you have only 15 centimeter per year. So that is how less the amount of rainfall is. Okay. Then this is also what is referred to as Marusthali. Now it features mushroom rock, shifting dunes, oasis, which are there. Oasis is what? The small ponds and pools of water that you have surrounded by some green patches in the desert area. So that is the feature of it. Okay. Now, then we come over to the portion of the other part, that is the portion of the Peninsular Plateau. Now, Peninsular Plateau, it is the oldest landmass in India and also one of the oldest landmass across the world. In fact, researchers have indicated that the region of the Peninsular Plateau, particularly the Chota Nagpur Plateau, they are amongst the oldest reaches and oldest places across the globe. Why there Kutch of run found, run of Kutch found, if there is no barrier? Run of Kutch, my dear friend, the region that you see as run of Kutch, this area, the entirety of this area, this was underwater for a long period of time. This area was a kind of an island like formation. A lot of it was underwater. And that is where the rivers draining from the region of Aravallis, they have continued to fill the patches and this area has come up above water. Now, in the area which has lied underwater, which kind of mineral resource you find? Crude oil. So in this area of Gujarat, do you find crude oil? Yes. That is why this is a region very rich in crude oil. Okay. But rainfall occurs sometimes in northern Rajasthan. That is a part of the traveling low pressure systems that you have. Sometimes the western disturbances will also cause rainfall in northern Rajasthan. In no desert will you come across where it has not rained at all, ever. Few of the deserts, it has not rained for 100 years or so. But then in almost all the desertified areas, you will have 1 or 2 days. Here also you have 15 centimeter of rainfall or 150 millimeter of rainfall every year. So it is not as if there will be absolutely no rain, but the rainfall will be very, very rare occurrence. Okay. And if Aravalli range doesn't exist, then Bay of Bengal branch brings rainfall in Rajasthan. No, it would have drifted away. It would have brought rainfall wherever it would have found a kind of an obstruction to it. That is where. Okay. Now, then we come to the portion of the Peninsular Plateau. Peninsular Plateau overall, rising from the height of 150. What is a plateau? Plateau is a flat tableland-like structure. It is a flat tableland-like structure like this. Okay. So 150 meter above the river plains up to an elevation of 600 meter to 900 meter is an irregular triangle known as the Peninsular Plateau. It is one of the oldest landforms created on Earth and easily the oldest landform in India. The peninsular region, having volcanic origin, has underwent erosional and weathering activities, due to which what was under the lower portions of the rocks has now come closer to the surface. That is why it is so very rich in minerals, and it is these lower portions from where we are continuously extracting minerals. Now, I want you to listen to the next part as a kind of a story, but obviously not a kind of a story where you sleep into it, but a kind of a story. And that will tell you about the entire formation of the region of the Peninsular Plateau. So, before that, when you observe the world around you, when you observe the physical map, you observe the various continents such as Africa, North America, South America, Antarctica, Asia, Europe. Now, how do you think they would have come into existence? Because we have seen at one point of time the entire world was underwater. At the after the phase of degasification and after the phase of torrential rainfall, the entire world was underwater. So how is it that these particular large land masses they came into existence? So the land masses. So think about it. Our human body, it is not as if immediately the entire body would have been created. Initially, cells would have been created. Multiple of these cells would have come together to form tissues. And that is where eventually the body structure would have come into existence. Similarly, any landmass at large does not come into existence at once. It is made up of many small building blocks. And those small building blocks, they are referred to as cratons. These are your very small building blocks. So you have, let's imagine, two cratons created due to volcanic eruption, obviously. They would have carried out deposits in between. You would have water in between. They would have carried out the deposit. These deposits would have come above water, and you would have a continuous landmass like this. That would have joined with another craton here. Eventually, you would have a complete landmass like this. So it is these cratons which build up the larger continents and the subcontinents and the land masses that you observe. Now, what happened in our case? Now, we have evidences which indicate to us that some portions of our country, for example, the region of the Himalayas, they have been created very recently, around 60-65 million years ago. Again, very recently in the context of geography, not in the context of history or polity. So around 60-65 million years ago. But you have certain regions which basically, such as the area of the Chota Nagpur Plateau. Now these have been created, area around Bastar Plateau. These have been created around 2 billion years back on an average. 2 billion years back. Long before any of the modern or complex life forms ever existed. So initially, you had billions of years ago formation of small land masses which would emerge as a result of the volcanic eruption. They would emerge above water. And you had the creation of these individual craters. So you had the creation of what is referred to as the Chota Nagpur craton. It is said that at one point of time, this Chota Nagpur craton extended up till the region of Meghalaya. Then, simultaneously, a little bit later itself, but almost roughly around the same time, you had the creation of another craton that you refer to as the Bastar craton. Then, again, around the same time, sometime later, you had a creation of a landmass here. Formation of the Aravallis would happen. You had the formation of the Bundelkhand craton. That also came into existence. And also, you had the creation of the Karnataka craton, the Dharwar craton. These were the building blocks of the entirety of the subcontinent that we see now. These were created as a result of the volcanic processes. Now we are talking about billions of years back, right? So over a span of many hundreds of millions of years, you had various different volcanic activities happening in this region. Now obviously at that point of time, when we are talking about the land that we are referring to, was not situated in the present position. It was situated somewhere completely different. Now at that point of time, you had multiple such volcanic eruptions, increasing the height of these cratons, creating many lofty mountain peaks in this area. These cratons would come together, creating the fold systems of mountains in between. For example, the Garjat range, the Garjat hills that you find in the region of Odisha, that is supposed to be a sum product of the Chota Nagpur and the Bastar craton coming together. Then these multiple volcanic eruptions, they created a kind of a mountain system, hill system on the sides as well. What presently we refer to the Eastern Ghats, the hills of the Eastern Ghats. There, over a span of millions of years, you had significant amount of volcanic eruptions, but over a period of millions of years, you also had the development of many rivers. Multiple rivers would originate from this area. The rivers that presently we don't even have the existence of. We are talking about paleo rivers, very old rivers. Multiple rivers would originate from this area. Now, as the rivers would originate, they would carry out their deposits, isn't it? Those deposits, they basically, where these deposits would come from, the rivers would originate, the rivers would erode the igneous rocks, and those eroded materials would be deposited. And you had the formation over a period of time, significant compression, formation of sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks would get converted into metamorphic rocks. That is how the landmass developed a kind of a continuity. This was the landmass which developed. In fact, not this, but if I were to tell you the exact dimension of the landmass, it was very much like this. This was the shape of the landmass which got created. Now, over a period of time, obviously, the Indian plate was moving northwards. As the Indian plate was moving northwards, it encountered the Reunion Island hotspot. Where is it? In the southern Indian Ocean. It is still active volcanically. Now, when Indian plate was there over the region of the Reunion Island hotspot, it was the western stretches of the Indian plate which lied over it. And it lied over it for a very long time. Or not for a very long time, but over a span of couple of millions of years. Now there, at that point of time, you had a very significant volcanic eruption. And you had basaltic lava which spread out. Now the basaltic lava flows like water. So that basaltic lava which spread out, it spread out in this region. In this entirety of the area, the basaltic lava spread out. And it spread out over the existing kind of a landmass, and it spread out basically in a kind of a layer-like formation. Now, obviously, it would not happen continuously, but it would happen over a period of, let's say, one deposit has happened. After that, again, another eruption after 1 lakh years. Again, after that, another eruption after 5 lakh years. That has further carried on to the deposits. So in between these deposits, you have water layers which are trapped, etc. So there are a series of such deposits of basaltic lava. Now, this basaltic lava deposits, if you observe from the sides, the side view, it will give you an appearance of a step-like formation here. If you ever want to visit that step-like formation, do venture out in the, ever go on a trip between Mumbai to, let's say, Nashik, Mumbai to Pune, you will observe around the Kasara Ghat section, etc. You will observe those layerings in the mountain systems in between. So that is where you have these kind of layerings indicating different era of these flood basalt eruption. Now, these step-like features, They are referred to as trepen. It is from this word trepen that the term traps are derived from. And because it happens in the region of Deccan, that is why we call it as Deccan traps. So this is the area where you have these Deccan traps. Now, it is these flood basaltic deposits, when they get broken, when they disintegrate, you have the fertile black soil which gets created. So these are the areas where you will find a lot of these fertile black soil formations as well. Now, India moved further north. Volcanic eruptions stopped. Volcanic eruptions were there as long as India was above the hotspot. India moved northwards. Now, then came the collision part, the collision with the Eurasian landmass. Now, when you have two such massive objects like plates, when they undergo collision, what happens? Cracks develop. You will have the impact will be so significant that cracks will develop. So cracks happen to develop. You had a crack which developed in this portion, in this area. And you also had a crack which developed here in this portion. Now, in both these areas, due to the development of the crack, the land simply subsided. The land went down. Now, in the case of the western coastline, the land went down, creating a very wide continental shelf. This continental shelf that you see, before that development of crack, before the collision of the country with the Himalayas, this was very much a part of the Indian landmass. But it was after that that it simply subsided. But here, when this subsided, it created a discontinuity between the plateau of Meghalaya and the rest of the plateaus. It created a kind of a gap, what we refer to as the Rajmahal Garo gap or the Malda gap. All the Indo-Brahm rivers found a way of exit from this area. Ganga, Brahmaputra started moving through that depression because where the land had sunk. And it is in this area that obviously as these mighty rivers would come, they would deposit. That is the present day region of Bangladesh and West Bengal. At one point of time, it was a part of the Peninsular Plateau, but now you will find nothing but fertile alluvial plains. That is the reason why when you talk about the Meghalaya Plateau, it is still considered to be a part of the Peninsular Plateau, separated from the rest by the Malda Gap or the Rajmahal Garo Gap. And that is the entire formation of the portion of Peninsular Plateau. Okay, so I will give a brief recap of this tomorrow again, but that is where we'll end the session. I hope that you have got a broader idea about how they have been created. You have got a better idea of the country that you are living in. And that is when we'll meet tomorrow. We'll end the session here today. Okay. Importance of Baramulla. Baramulla is a town, trading town, which is out there. Baramulla is a trading which lied on the ancient Mughal route as well, on the part of the Silk route as well. It is a trading town. That is the gorge, where you have all the water which was accumulated that exited. Okay. Why didn't the mighty Himalayan rivers erode the plateau left to the fore deep? Because they understand the rivers are coming from here. Here you have the plateau. There's a large gap in between. So the water kept on accumulating in that area. That is why. Okay. Kailash ranges are in the part of Tibet, yes, in China. Atlas for Indian geography, Lakshya, I would suggest that all the places that we have referred to, please take a look at the physiographical portion of Indian map in greater detail. You will get a better clarity of this. Main purpose of Wakhan corridor. Wakhan corridor has served as the purpose of aiding transportation, trade, and merchants for hundreds of years who have tried to move from the region. For example, Marco Polo, when he went into the court of the Mongol king Kublai Khan, he moved through the region of the Wakhan corridor. Peninsular, not clear. What is not clear in Peninsular? Why Aravali don't have cloudburst as other ranges? Because the height is not so much. The height is less. Do we need to remember the era or period of origin of these, like quaternary Pleistocene? No. Um, Charan, I started my preparation last month. Can I complete the vast syllabus? Absolutely, yes. Why not? Uh, how folds are formed in the northeastern part? Okay. Before that, Dwaipayan, it is my first live class because from 24th July exam was going on. But I've come here after doing all the previous, every chapters. Uh, humble gratitude from my side, Dwaipayan. So I hope that this continues and you are able to revise. Rajmahal Hills are a part of the northeastern extent of Chota Nagpur Plateau. This is where the Rajmahal Hills are situated. Why the land between the plateaus subsided? Because the force created due to collision was so intense, it created cracks. How folds are formed, Sarita, you had asked. So that is where initially the collision was in this direction. Then after that, because of obstruction faced here, you had the land pushing in the eastward direction also, creating those faults. From where the basaltic lava came out? From the region of the Reunion Island hotspot. Map pointing, Lakshmi, as of today, I would suggest all these various places. So look at India's physical map, look at the various different hills, first of all. Then look at the various subdivisions within the plateaus. Okay. Where does the rivers emerge in the cratons? So from the various different hills, based upon, just like now you have the rivers originating in peninsular part of India as well. So there also you had the origin, any landmass which comes into existence, rivers will always come into existence along with it. Mansi thrust also developed in the south of Himalayas and foredeep also. Yes. So that is because of, see, whenever you have a kind of an upfolding, there's a associated downfolding as well. So that is your foredeep. Further, if you compress it, here you will have some breakage. That is the thrust. Was Madagascar part of Indian subcontinent? Absolutely yes. Conquers are basically the calcareous concretions, in the sense that when you have the older deposits, when they lie in the same region for a long period of time, few of them will get together due to the calcium that is present in them. Calcium has a binding property. They will find slightly larger concretions or larger accumulations. That is conquer. Himalaya from our side is steeper. Bugyals are basically the high altitude summer grasslands in the middle Himalayas. They are bugyals. Okay. How Gujarat came out of the sea? Because of depositions created by the rivers. And also because of the earthquakes, many of the times have given a slight upliftment due to the aperogenic force. Yes, Krishna. Okay. Southern Himadri is more steeper, Kumari. Sarita, I just repeated how folds were formed in the northeastern part. Kindly take a look at the recordings. I just answered that question for you. And okay. Chos are basically the dissected forms that you will observe, the dissected river sections on the seasonal streams. They dissect the landmass, erode the landmass in the southern face of the Shivalik, particularly in the region of the western Himalayas. That is where during rainfall, you have significant amount of orographic rainfall. Highest peak of Himalayas table, need to by heart. Why? Have you ever come across a PYQ where they have asked what is the height of the this particular peak or not? Absolutely not. Roshan, revise. Revise, it will be clear. Khadar, what types of crops? Rice, wheat, all the food grains, vegetables, everything can be grown. Okay. So that is where we'll end the session here today, guys. We meet again tomorrow. We complete this portion and then we move ahead into the portion of the drainage system. So that will be all from my side. Do take care of yourself. Goodbye. Good night. Thank you.